moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good luck.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark Meets at My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on Friday, the 11th of October. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
Could this plan save the NHS? As the country braces for another winter crisis, the government is planning to pay private hospitals to clear waiting lists for 2.5 million patients. Would you support the public-private hospital plan? Or is this beyond the pale for our NHS?
And is Farage rattled? Tory leadership hopeful Robert Jenrick claims he is, and he claims he's the man to make the whole Reform Party redundant. Is he right?
Where's Sue Gray? The Prime Minister chairs the first ever Council of the Nations and Regions in Edinburgh today. But Sue Gray, the newly appointed envoy for those nations and regions, is somehow nowhere to be seen.
And would you take a taxi but with no driver? Elon Musk has announced new robo-taxis aimed at making minicabs cheaper than buses. He also showed off a new humanoid robot called Optimus, which for the price of a car could soon be your own household robot butler. Right, we're interested to get your views on this whole plan for the NHS. Now, a lot of you have got in touch already and made the point that the NHS already does use private facilities. We do get that. But this is going to expand that quite considerably. 2.5 million more patients to be treated through private facilities,
It's
private
interesting,
hospitals.
isn't it? You got this massive expansion of private outsourcing under Tony Blair. Then the so-called right-wing Conservative government didn't do any of that for 14 years, or barely increased it by any amount at all. And now there's going to be a massive expansion. It seems that if you like private involvement in the NHS, the Labour Party's the one for you.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking to Nana and Ben a little bit earlier, and they pointed out that you know, with the private school debate, where they don't want to use those facilities, don't want to work in partnership with the private schools, God forbid, but it's absolutely OK if you're Wes Streeting and it's the NHS.
It's a weird cognitive dissonance there. Sort of, they put health and education in different buckets when I would have thought it would be philosophically consistent to sort of, you know, share and care.
But, I mean, if this works and it saves lives and it does cut those waiting lists down, then I'm all for it. I mean, it sounds quite pragmatic, but let us know at home what you make of it. Is there a slight you know, is it a little bit jarring coming from the Labour Party to want this use of private resources? Is it, you know, a small step towards the entire privatisation of the NHS, or is that conspiratorial thinking?
It's conspiratorial thinking.
Well, you never know. You never know.
But gbnews.com/your say is the way to get involved, as always. All that to come and so much more after your news headlines.
Good afternoon, I'm Sophia Wensler. These are your headlines from the GB Newsroom. Rescue efforts are underway after a deadly hurricane cut a destructive path across Florida, with at least 16 people known to have died. Hundreds have been rescued from apartments, while a Coast Guard saved a man clinging to a cool box. More than 4 million homes and businesses in Florida were left without power yesterday when Hurricane Milton struck. The hurricane is estimated to have caused tens of billions of dollars in damage, but officials say the worst-case scenario has been avoided. Now, at least 22 people have been killed and 117 others injured in an Israeli strike on a central neighbourhood in Beirut. That's according to the Lebanese Health Ministry. It's being reported a senior Hezbollah figure targeted in the attack is understood to have survived. Rescue efforts are now underway to search for survivors in the rubble. Meanwhile, Israel said Hezbollah fired more than 190 projectiles from Lebanon into Israel yesterday. And back in the UK, the Prime Minister is preparing to chair the first Council of Nations and Regions in Edinburgh today without Sue Gray. She was appointed as the Council's new special envoy, but it's believed she's taking a short break before starting the role amid recent controversy around her previous role as Chief of Staff. Sir Keir Starmer will meet with leaders of the devolved nations for the summit that will focus on spreading investment and growth across all parts of the UK. Meanwhile, Rachel Reeves has been forced to deny rumours capital gains tax could rise to 39%, its highest level on record, in the upcoming budget. That's as experts warn an increase could drive businesses out of the country. The Chancellor has opened the door to raising capital gains tax to plug a hole of up to £25 billion. Capital gains tax is paid on the profits made on the sales of assets, with current rates ranging from 10% to 24%. It comes as the UK economy grew in August. That's after 2 months of stagnation. Official figures from the Office for National Statistics show gross domestic product rose by 0.2%. In other news, Robert Jenrick has told GB News that Nigel Farage's Reform UK is rattled by the prospect of him as Tory leader. Marking the second day of campaigning for the remaining 2 Tory leadership candidates, he vowed to cap immigration, leave the ECHR and defeat reform.
I'm going to be crystal clear. And as a result of that, and my record, the fact that I fought for these policies in government and ultimately chose to resign when I couldn't get any more and make the case in Parliament and the country for change, I'm going to hopefully bring those people back to us. Make the Conservative Party the natural home for small C Conservatives again. And you're already starting to see that. People joining my campaign who had previously said that they were going to vote reform. Nigel Farage himself sounds rattled. He is worried that if the party was led by someone like myself, with my record and my policies, we would make reform redundant. That's my job. That's what I need to do.
Now, the Met Police has just confirmed 40 new allegations against Mohammed Al-Fayed after a public appeal. The accusations include sexual harassment, assault and rape, following a BBC documentary that aired last month. Harrods has confirmed that over 200 individuals are now in the process of settling claims with the business as the Metropolitan Police begins investigating new allegations. The force is also reviewing all previous reports from 1979 to 2013. This year's Nobel Peace Prize has been awarded to Japanese campaign group Nihon Hidonkyu for their efforts to achieve a world free of nuclear weapons.
The Peace Prize for 2024 to the Japanese organization Nihon Hidankyu.
The organisation is made up of and represents survivors of atomic bombings, including Hiroshima, and aims to demonstrate through witness testimony that nuclear weapons must never be used. Japan's Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has called the award extremely meaningful. And finally, Elon Musk has unveiled a Tesla Cybercab without a steering wheel and an Optimus humanoid robot, announcing that the future is here. Tesla launched the much-anticipated robotaxi at an event in Los Angeles overnight, with CEO Elon Musk saying drivers would be able to make passive income from the new developments. He confirmed that the Cybercab would go into production in 2026 and cost less than $30,000. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 8 minutes past 12. Now, could the private sector be the key to rescuing the NHS?
Well, the government is considering a plan to use more private facilities for things like cancer checks, surgery and intensive care. This is all in a bid to clear that very long backlog.
Well, under the £1 billion plan submitted by private hospitals, the private sector could treat up to 2.5 million more patients, with some treatments starting in just weeks.
So could this be the major turning point we've been hoping for the NHS?
Well, we're joined now by the former Medical Director and Chief Medical Officer of Bupa, Dr Andrew Vallance-Owen. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Does this make sense as an idea, given, frankly, we don't have that many private hospitals?
Yeah. Well, it certainly makes sense. We've seen I was quite involved right back in Tony Blair's time with the early days of this, and we picked up quite a lot of business in the private sector from those days. But in terms of making sense, well, we haven't yet had a decision from West Streeton. They're thinking about it. And I think capacity is the problem. At the moment, the private hospitals are more full than they were in the past because of the waiting list crisis, so more people are going private. So we need this extra capacity they're talking about if they're really going to deliver on this promise.
What I don't understand is what's in it for the private hospitals themselves, the private providers, because, as you say, presumably they've got a lot of patients of their own. Do they have this capacity? What's in it for them? Is it a huge amount of money that the government are going to give them?
Well, it will depend, of course, on the contract, won't it? And that will be negotiated. But at the moment and in the past, the NHS work was done basically at cost. So the competition wasn't on cost, it was on quality of service and customer service and things, which was what people were interested in. So, and of course, the money they're talking about is capital. To build more facilities, which covers the point I was making earlier, to build more diagnostic centres in the first instance, which will be quite quick, because that doesn't involve the building of operating theatres, intensive care units, extra buildings and things like that. But there will be, I would imagine, more of a delay in delivering on the actual waiting list of the operations. But it's getting the diagnosis first and getting the x-rays done and all those tests done first, which is part of the hold-up. So that will certainly speed things up. But the contract, we'll have to see what the contract brings. But obviously, there will be a negotiation on that for volume of work.
I suppose that gets to the absolute crux of the issue. Instead of talking about using up the capacity that exists in the private sector or the NHS, it's about creating more capacity and how quickly more capacity can be created. Andrew, in your experience, do you think the private sector is actually better at building those new diagnostics facilities? Is it more efficient for the NHS to give some money to the private sector to get them to just build this stuff well and build it quickly to actually increase that capacity?
I suspect it probably is. In the past, when we've had the private finance initiative and things like that, where civil servants or people who have not been used to negotiating with the commercial sector, have made mistakes, in my view. And I think that probably the private sector will be much more efficient and cost efficient as well, and cost effective at getting these buildings up quickly. And I think if they have made this offer, and that's what we're hearing from the independent hospitals, team, David Hare, then I would have thought that if they're saying that they can do it, they have already got a plan to do it. But it will still take time. We don't have a timeline. And the other thing, of course, is NHS itself. Part of the reason why capacity wasn't taken up as much as it could have been in the past is because many elements of the NHS management don't like to use the private sector. It's a point of principle. And, so that will be important that the NHS buys into it, and I think in the press release I've seen, they're saying we welcome any help, but it's sort of quite lukewarm. So whether they've been involved in this discussion or not, I don't know.
Yes, and whether the unions will take a strong stance on it. So who would get priority then? If this were to go ahead, NHS patients or patients who have paid for their care?
Well, that's another debatable point, obviously. I think if they're separate units, and that was the good thing about the independent sector treatment centres that were built by the private sector way back when, Alan Milburn was Secretary of State for Health, and as I say, I had a part in that. They were independent units and paid for and run by the private sector. So it wasn't a question of setting priority in the same hospital. It's when you bring NHS patients into a private hospital that issue can come up. And you can only do that if you know you've got the capacity to do it. And then they are treated really, once they're in the hospital, in exactly the same way as patients, who are paying privately.
So they'd just be using the private facilities, but it would be NHS doctors working in those facilities, and it would be in a separate place to the private clients, I guess.
Well, you touch upon one of the other issues here, and we've had this before. It's staffing. One of the reasons why we have the waiting list and the waiting list is because of the shortage of doctors, the shortage of nurses. And it's often those doctors who work in private hospitals. So, they may be able to build the buildings, but will they be able to staff them up? And that's why, again, in the Daily Telegraph article, it says that they are thinking of bringing people from overseas and that sort of thing. So I think that might be a pinch point in terms of getting it moving. And they'll have to really think through that, because it's the same people. The consultants who work in the private sector generally work in the NHS as well. So that will be one of the challenges they have to work out on how to overcome.
Well, Dr. Andrew Vallance-Owen, really appreciate your time and your thoughts. It's been a fascinating conversation. Former Chief Medical Officer of Bupa. Thanks for joining us.
Very interesting. Got a much better idea of how it actually works in practice, or might work in practice. But how do we not have enough people? 1.3 million people work for the NHS.
Yeah, and it's risen by, what is it? I think the numbers of nurses, numbers of doctors up by something like a fifth in the last 5 or so years. But the problem is...
Too many part-time?
You look at the number of scanners that the NHS has compared to the French healthcare system or the German healthcare system. You look at the number of MRI machines. You look at the kit that they can work with. There's so much less. So we put all this money in hiring new doctors and new nurses, but then they're all having to queue up and wait to use outdated systems, and that just makes it their time is used so much less efficiently than it could be. Yeah, that productivity question. Anyway, we've got some breaking news. The Met Police has confirmed 40 new allegations against former Harrods owner Mohammed Al Fayed after a public appeal. Well, the accusations include sexual harassment, assault and rape, and follow a BBC documentary that aired last month. Well, joining us now is our Home and Security editor, Mark White, for more details on this. An astonishing number of people coming forward.
Yes, all the while more and more allegations against the former owner of Harrods, who died in August of last year, and really painting the picture of a prolific sexual offender. These allegations, of course, can never now be tried in a court of law, given that he has now died. But all of the while, more people coming forward. And as you said, 40 new allegations to the Met on top of 21 allegations relating to 21 separate women that they had been investigating over the years, over a number of years, from 1995 until 2013. Those 21 previous allegations were made. The Met said that on 4 separate occasions they contacted the Crown Prosecution Service, and in particular on 2 occasions they passed very significant full files of evidence, but for whatever reason the Crown Prosecution Service decided not to launch a formal prosecution against Mohammed Al Fayed.
But to state the obvious, Mark, Mohammed Al Fayed is dead. What can the Met Police do?
Well, listen, there's a couple of strands to this. There's the potential criminal investigation that's underway. And with regard to that, the Met could certainly look at historical allegations. They may be explored and noted, and that at least would give those who are making these allegations some kind of comfort that what has happened to them has been put on the record, and they're diverted perhaps to agencies that can assist them as well if they're still suffering the post-traumatic effects of their ordeals. But in addition to that, the Met have also revealed that they are not just now investigating allegations that were made by people against directly Mohammed Al Fayed, but against others who it's believed had knowledge of this, in some way turned a blind eye or perhaps encouraged his behaviour. So there are individuals who we believe are still alive today that could face potential criminal sanction.
And that's a very important point that, as you say, there will be people who were in and around this man who knew of this.
Yep.
And obviously accusations of corruption and turning a blind eye, that will give some of the victims, alleged victims.
There's one more thing to add briefly, and that's there is the Harrods Survivors Group, a group of lawyers representing victims as well. They've launched a lawsuit against Harrods for not safeguarding these women during that time. And they've just announced today 116 women have contacted them, with another 200 inquiries, but direct allegations from 116 women. Now, that's being pursued. It relates to Harrods, but it also relates to other interests relating to Mohammed Al Fayed Football Club, the Ritz Hotel in Paris, and his properties at Park Lane in London and Oxted.
Goodness me, a big list, and
Yeah,
much more to come, no doubt. Mark White, thank you enormously for that update.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up on today's show. Is Nigel Farage rattled? Well, Tory leadership hopeful Robert Jenrick claims he is. And he also claims he's the man to make the whole Reform Party redundant. Is he right?
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
There's a huge financial and mental strain for parents, but we have this system now where it talks about they bringing a family member to help, but I don't think that's happening a lot of the time. I think people are having to be off work, look after their child, and often, sorry to say, but their school always calls the mum, and then you have this situation where you have nobody to look after your child. People's grandparents don't seem to want to do it so much, and often family members aren't just down the road. So what we have is no village. And I think it's really important when you have a child that you need that village.
Are children getting more sicker than they used to be? Or is it just that we take the odd sniffle a bit more seriously now since 2020?
Yes, I do think the odd sniffle can be. I know in my school they say 3 days away, you know, the slightest little thing, and it's like...
If you have a cold?
Yeah, no, please, go in, yeah. And
3 days off if you have a cold for a child, and we wonder why all these parents aren't at work. I think some of these figures about people who could be working and aren't working, they're not necessarily on benefits, but some of them will be people who, during the pandemic, particularly parents, decided to get a different work-life balance. They quite liked being at home, and they realised the children are benefiting from it. Do you think those people are in these statistics
of people staying at home with not working.
Who decided to not go back to work of working age?
Yes, I think a lot of people don't want to go into an office anymore either. They've had that little bit of freedom and they're like, I'm not going in. And I know employers are trying to get them to go in, but they just want to be at home. They want to be near their children if their children are sick, whether that's the mum or the dad. And also a lot of people don't live near their office or wherever. They don't want to commute. Train fares have gone up, so they say, well, why should I pay? So you have this whole knock-on effect throughout the economy.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 23 minutes past 12. Now, Robert Jenrick has made the bold claim that he has had Nigel Farage rattled as he vies to become the next Tory leader.
Yes, Jenrick wants to leave the European Court of Human Rights. He's made that very clear. He wants to increase deportations and also suspend foreign aid to countries that refuse to take back their own criminals. That's what he told GB News of his plan to win back Reform UK voters.
I'm going to be crystal clear. And as a result of that, and my record, the fact that I fought for these policies in government and ultimately chose to resign when I couldn't get any more and make the case in Parliament and the country for change, I'm going to hopefully bring those people back to us. Make the Conservative Party the natural home for small C Conservatives again. And you're already starting to see that. People joining my campaign who had previously said that they were going to vote Reform. Nigel Farage himself sounds rattled. He is worried that if the party was led by someone like myself, with my record and my policies, we would make Reform redundant. That's my job. That's what I need to do.
Nigel Farage himself sounds rattled. A bold claim from Robert Jenrick, but is he right? Well, delighted to be joined by a man who should know one thing or two about Nigel Farage, the former head of communications for Reform UK, long-term spinner for Nigel Farage, Gawain Towler. Gawain, thanks for joining us.
Happy.
What do you make of that? I mean, we saw your reaction in the studio as you listened to Robert Jenrick there. You're not entirely convinced?
I think the word rattled does entertain me. The only thing's like a death rattle, but that's not Reform, who've just gone up to 90,000 members, which I suspect may well have been crossing the Tory numbers over the next few weeks, something tells me. Be interesting. And one of the things about, the business about the One Nation lot not voting, they're not going to vote for either of these two. So we're not going to know the turnout, are we? We're not going to know the Tory membership figures, are we?
We're not going to know the membership figures. We will know the numbers who have voted for each. So we surmised from that, in terms of turnout last time, that the membership stood at around 160, 170,000.
It's not
but obviously
that now,
things could have changed.
And if you look at the amount of money they've brought in, Dan Hannan says 90,000, around about that. It's crossover. If we're rattled, the only person that anything to do with rattling is people like Jenrick chucking theirs out of the pram.
Yeah.
His translucency, there's something not quite fully there, in the sense that when he was standing up at Tory conference, it was like a sixth form debate. The calling of names, the sort of pettiness there. And he's got this, I believe in this, I really do. You've got to believe me, I really do believe in this. And he has that, it's like a child worsted. Oh, you don't believe in that. You don't really want to leave the ECHR, do you, Robert? No, I really do. And it's this strange way of coming across.
So you say he's not necessarily trustworthy on this stuff.
I don't think
but
he's
hang on. If he does become leader of the opposition, leader of the Conservative Party, and he's putting forward policies that you'd see in the Reform manifesto, then what is the point of the Reform Party?
It's a question of trust, isn't it? the Conservative Party, after all, for the last 20 years have been saying tens of thousands of migrants, reducing migrants, and here he is again saying the same thing. And they've deceived us every single time. So why would somebody believe that? And
well, he would say that's why he quit government. Because Rishi Sunak wouldn't agree with him when it came to immigration and getting it down.
He would say that. Dare I say, wouldn't he? And amount of times we've had these same promises. I'm fine, he'll say that. But I don't think anybody who votes reform or is considering vote reform would believe him. I'd like to know who these reform people are joining his campaign. Please do tell, Robert. I've never heard of them.
Interesting.
And I know most of the people in reform, having been around for 20 years.
So there's no one? There's no one that you know who thinks, actually, Robert Jenrick does it for me, I return to the Conservatives?
I have not met a single one.
Not a single sausage?
Not a single sausage. And apart from anything else...
Or hostage.
Or sausage, yes. In that time, over the last few weeks, until conference, the only way any of the Tory leadership candidates could get any column inches in any media mention was by slagging off Nigel. It was hysterically funny.
And yet, Grain...
they are fixated on him. They are
earlier
fixated
this
on
week,
him.
back when it looked as though James Cleverly might be the heir anointed to be the next Tory leader, I remember a certain Mr Nigel Farage on this television channel saying the Tories won't put Jenrick through, and Jenrick was the biggest threat to him. I mean, are we not to believe Nigel?
He may well be the biggest threat, but I don't see it as a great threat. This idea that he's rattled suggests he's quaking in his patent leather shoes. It's ridiculous.
Nigel, Gawain, what's Nigel got that Robert Jenrick doesn't?
Integrity. A statement of belief that he has stuck to over many years, whether it's popular or not. He hasn't swung with the mood. He doesn't swing with the wind. He has people... They may not like what he says, but they believe he means it.
Is there something deeper here? That it isn't perhaps about policy, but is more about personality? That the average Joe might prefer to have a pint with Nigel Farage than Mr Robert Jenrick?
I think that's probably true, and in fact, it's certainly true. But I think it is down to integrity. Everybody talks about it, and the volte-face that Robert came up with in the last couple of years, one wonders how... It may be authentic, but there's something in his tone that makes me doubt it.
Is it not the case, though, that reform will never have a broad enough appeal to win a general election? And so by continuing, they just make it more likely that Labour will stay in power?
I think Labour are doing a very good job of undermining that option themselves.
But when the right-wing vote splits?
Most of the Tory vote, as far as I see it, isn't particularly right-wing. These people who say they're not going to support either of these candidates. I don't think... You're right that Nigel said that. That's absolutely true. But until, a day or so ago, nobody thought... And I think that somebody made a stuff up with their numbers. I'm going to lend you some voters to stop... Ooh, bother. And that genius from those high-powered brains in the Tory... Why would we bother? I think the country has had it with the Conservatives. I don't think that either Kemi or Robert are going to reconnect with the electorate. I think that if you look as we go forward, we've got the locals next year, but in Scotland and Wales, there's every chance, even today's polling, let alone in 2 years' time, that Reform are going to beat the Tories in both of those regions and nations. And then you start thinking, what is the point of the Conservatives? People have been asking this question for years. I certainly have, and I've never got a decent answer. Now, he's trying to propose... he basically looks at our manifesto and goes, oh, I'll have that, thank you. You don't want this, do you? No, we'll have that. And...
Well, he's the only one who's worked in the government.
Why would he just... Why would a voter go, we'll take the guy who purloined these policies rather than the guy who created these policies?
Well, we'll see. We'll see if out-Faraging the Farage is actually possible or if it's all a road to nowhere. Grain Towler, formerly of Reform UK, long-term spinner for Nigel. Thanks so much for joining us here.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Yes, lots of you are getting in touch, so we will get to some of those views in a little bit. But just to remind you that in a week's time, the final two Conservative leadership candidates, Robert Jenrick himself and Kemi Badenoch, will be going head-to-head live on GB News. You do not want to miss that, do you?
No, you certainly don't. That is a date for your diary. But this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up on today's programme. Number 10 has declined to say whether the government's first 100 days has been a success. This all comes as the Prime Minister chairs the first ever Council of the Nations and Regions in Edinburgh today. But the Nations and Regions Tsar, Sue Gray, is nowhere to be seen. Curious.
It's 12:32. These are your headlines from the GB newsroom. Rescue efforts are underway after a deadly hurricane cut a destructive path across Florida, with at least 16 people known to have died. Hundreds have been rescued from apartments, while a Coast Guard saved a man clinging to a cool box. More than 4 million homes and businesses were left without power yesterday when Hurricane Milton struck. The hurricane is estimated to have caused tens of billions of dollars in damage, but officials say the worst-case scenario has been avoided. Now, at least 22 people have been killed and 117 others injured in an Israeli strike on a central neighbourhood in Beirut. That's according to the Lebanese Health Ministry. It's being reported a senior Hezbollah figure targeted in the attack is understood to have survived. Meanwhile, Israel said Hezbollah fired more than 190 projectiles from Lebanon into Israel yesterday. Now, back in the UK, Sir Keir Starmer is not planning to hold a celebration to mark his first 100 days tomorrow. That's according to Number 10, who also declined to say if the first 100 days have been a success, saying instead it is for the public to judge that. It comes as the Prime Minister is preparing to chair the first Council of Nations and Regions in Edinburgh today, but without Sue Gray. She was appointed as the Council's new special envoy, but Number 10 have said she's taking a break after the intense commentary about her work in government. They added that details of her new role as envoy to the regions will be published shortly. Meanwhile, the UK economy grew in August. That's after 2 months of stagnation. Official figures from the Office for National Statistics show gross domestic product rose by 0.2%. And the Met Police has just confirmed 14 new allegations against Mohammed Al-Fayed after a public appeal. The accusations include sexual harassment, assault and rape following a BBC documentary that aired last month. Harrods has confirmed that over 200 individuals are now in the process of settling claims with the business as the Metropolitan Police begins investigating new allegations. The force is also reviewing all previous reports from 1979 to 2013. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Well, plenty of showers across Scotland, but for many of us, there's going to be plenty of fine and sunny weather. It is going to be feeling cold through much of the day, though, and that's because we're still dragging in some air from the Arctic, which is moving its way across the country. We do have some weather systems just moving their way into Scotland, bringing that unsettled field here. So much more cloud across Scotland, perhaps at times western parts of Northern Ireland, some showers, longer spells of rain. This could turn heavy at times, perhaps even wintry across the Scottish peaks. But elsewhere across much of England and Wales, plenty of autumnal sunshine. And in lighter winds, it shouldn't feel quite as cold as yesterday, but it will still have that chilly feel in the air. And as we progress into the evening, those unsettled conditions are going to continue across Scotland's showers, longer spells of rain in northern parts, and it still could have a wintry element across higher ground. Still a few showers feeding into western parts of Northern Ireland, but elsewhere there's going to be plenty of clear skies to end the new week. Perhaps just a few showers drifting in towards southern coasts. Now, there will still be plenty of clear spells overnight, perhaps not quite as many as last night, so not getting quite as cold, but it is still going to be another chilly night. Still a chance we could see some pockets of frost around Wales, across the Midlands, and just anywhere where you really catch those longer clear spells. But moving into parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, that's where we're going to continue to see those blustery showers and those spells of rain. So an unsettled start here, and this rain is gradually going to slowly move its way through into the Scottish borders, northern parts of England, so quite a wet day on offer here. Gradually clearing from the north, but still a chance of those wintry showers across higher ground, and still plenty of that autumnal sunshine to start the weekend. Still the chance of a few showers here and there, and it is going to be feeling cold, particularly in that brisk breeze.
The latest GB News travel.
Eastbound on the M62, a lane closure and heavy traffic to a broken down vehicle from 19 at Haywood through to 20 at Rochdale. Northbound on the M1, a lane closure to emergency bridge repairs at junction 38 for Huddersfield, but traffic is coping well. Very slow, however, for the southbound side of the M11. It is now closed due to an accident at junction 8 for Bishop Stortford through to junction 7A for Harlow North. Northbound on the M3, queue in traffic in 2 lanes close to an accident from Winchester at 10 through to junction 9 for Winchester North. And finally, in Devon, the northbound side of the M5 is partially blocked to a broken down vehicle from Tiverton at 27 to Wellington at 26, delays to 28. For now, that's your very latest travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's now 12:38. Now, Number 10 have declined to say if the first 100 days in office for the Prime Minister have been a success.
Goodness me, this comes as the Prime Minister chaired the first Council of Nations and Regions in Edinburgh today. But Sue Gray, the new special envoy for those regions and nations, is nowhere to be seen.
Why is that? We're joined by our political editor, Christopher Hope. Christopher, thank you very much indeed. Love you to bring us up to date. But also, has anyone seen Sue Gray?
Not yet, no. She, of course, left her role as Chief of Staff on Sunday, didn't she, Emily and Tom? And now she's having a short break after what Number 10 describe as the intense commentary about her role in government. So she is doing something else. She is the nations and regions envoy, but apart from knowing what it's called, we know nothing more about the job. It's a direct ministerial appointment. We don't know if she's being paid. We know that she isn't in Scotland today with Sir Keir Starmer at a meeting of that exact thing, this summit, this Council of the Nations and Regions. Sir Keir Starmer is up there meeting with other First Ministers of Wales and Scotland and the Deputy and First Minister of Northern Ireland. There should be a clip will play out around 2 o'clock when he's responding to journalist questions up there. But otherwise, it's all quite low-key. We're coming up to the 100 days of this government tomorrow. No plans for a celebration. He'll be behind me, hard at work, preparing for the investment summit on Monday when he's welcoming the world's business leaders. But it's business as usual. And I did ask in that lobby, has it been a success the first 100 days of his deputy official spokesman? That is for the public to judge, I was told.
Well, it is for the public to judge, and according to a new YouGov poll, almost half of Labour voters who voted for Keir Starmer's government are disappointed by the start. So it's a pretty important question to ask.
Yes, it is. I mean, to be fair to the government, they're trying to focus on what they're doing. They do list the employment rights legislation out published yesterday as one of their improvements. I also asked who in government has any experience of being in business, and the spokesman couldn't give an answer. They have appointed an investment minister just now yesterday who used to work on some AI technology, and she'll be around on Monday. But I think if you look at who's running the country now, there's a lack of entrepreneurial experience, business experience that was there in the Tory government, which could become a problem for some people as we go forward. But of course, it's okay news today from the economy, growing by 0.2%. It's not in negative territory, or it's not stalling, and that's something. But all of business, all of our viewers and listeners, as we know from our mailbag, Tom and Emily, are waiting for the budget on October the 30th, and I think that's what the focus is on.
I can name 2 or 3 names from the last cabinet in the last government that founded 4 or 5 different businesses, and that was just Grant Shapps. Jokes aside, there is, of course, a serious point here, which is that 100 days in, you expect governments to be in their honeymoon period still. This government clearly hasn't had one. You've seen personal ratings for the Prime Minister, for the Chancellor, crash down almost as fast as Liz Truss. What is next, Chris?
Well, they wouldn't want to talk much about the next 100 days, but what's clear is they want to be judged by what they call their missions to grow the economy, restore the NHS and the like. They've got these 5 missions run from the building behind me in the Cabinet Office, and they want to be judged on delivery. So to be fair to the government, they haven't had much to deliver in the first 100 days. One of the problems, I think, is, Tom and Emily, this delay in having a budget. The budget is so important to setting the tone on tax and spend for any administration. The last comparable moment in Labour politics in this country's history was in 1997. The budget then was after 6 weeks. And of course, on day 1 or day 2, we had that big moment of removing interest rates from being set by the Chancellor in number 11 Downing Street, but given over to experts in the Bank of England, the MPC as it's known now. Waiting 16 weeks for that first budget, I think, has caused a degree of paralysis in this government. It's lost its momentum since the end of July. It started quickly and it's trickled away to nothing really happening of note, really, in August and September. They've been buffeted by the freebie scandal about freebies accepted by Keir Starmer and other senior people in government, and haven't really had an answer to change the subject. That will all change, I think, on October 30th, when this government finally resets its difficult launch, I think, and sets out what the plans are for the next 5 years. But having that delay in that budget, I think, has not made it any easier for this government to start well.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that will go down in the political history books as a bit of a grave error.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Chris Hope, thank you so much for joining us live from Downing Street post that meeting behind that famous door. Got to say, a lot of you have been getting in touch on this. John has a comment on the budget. John says, it wouldn't surprise me if this budget was the highest viewed ever recorded watching it, because people are waiting to see how much they're going to be screwed.
That could be true. Lots of you were praising Gawain Towler and his views. Lots of you don't seem to think that Robert Jenrick is making Nigel Farage quake in his boots. One of you suggested, I can't find your message now, but one of you suggested that they look each other in the eye and see who's rattled. So perhaps that could happen. Could happen.
Someone else has said if the Tories just keep criticising reform, they will get nowhere. We can see that the Tories have so many centre-left wet wipes. They are laughable.
Strong stuff. And on the NHS, we were talking about the use of the private sector with the NHS. Maggie says the NHS already use private hospitals. My mother-in-law is using private through the NHS, and I can tell you it's very efficient. Her appointments are on time and out within about 20 minutes. Was in A&E on Tuesday with father-in-law, and he's seen triage in 2 hours, etc. So everything seems to be moving swiftly with the use of private hospitals.
Interesting
So extend
stuff.
that, perhaps a good thing.
Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Keep your thoughts coming in, gbnews.com/your say. But here's a question for you. Would you take a taxi with no driver? Elon Musk has announced new robo-taxis. And he also showed off a humanoid robot, a robot butler, which could soon be your own household chore doer. Ironing your clothes, even picking up your shopping.
Making your cocktail, perhaps.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're joined by Lewis Oakley and Esther Stanhope. And Lewis, let's start with Free Gear Keir, shall we? It's been the story of the week, and apparently it's led to, well, calamity in the polls.
Yeah, so he has dropped by 26 points in the opinion polls. And, I mean, it's just been sort of going down from day one. He didn't even start that high. But, yeah, this is just bad optics. As we say, like, he hasn't done anything illegal or wrong. Everything was declared, but at the same time, you're telling people they don't get their winter fuel allowance, and you're there walking off with your swag bag. It's just not a good look. And even, you know, I was thinking as well, the optics of them trying to clamp down on MPs having second jobs. You know, any of those could turn around and say, well, actually, we have to pay for our own clothes. I just think it's just bad optics that he's had. And, you know, we've got those comparisons of Sunak in the stands. He's just sat amongst the people. And
Prince William goes to Villa games, albeit in the director's box, but it's not an 8k per game seat. And by the way, can I just mention, this isn't just an isolated Labour incident. Since the start of their tenure, they were accused of filling the civil service with previous Labour donors, previous Labour aides, people who worked for Labour Together think tank. The civil service is meant to be politically neutral, and they bypassed a lot of procedures to get people into their positions, not least the Chancellor Rachel Reeves, who parachuted Ian Caulfield, his name was, who donated £5,000 personally to her, and then he ended up in the Treasury with a 175k a year job. Yes, he did resign after it was revealed in the Times, but it does make you wonder, you know, you've spent years having a go at the Tories for this, and you do exactly the same thing.
Yeah, it's full of hypocrisy, and also the whole Sue Gray thing, and they were slagging off the Conservatives for not towing the line, and now they're being hypocrites because now they're taking freebies.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It is now 12:48, and last night, Tesla boss Elon Musk, he unveiled the firm's long-awaited robo-taxi called the Cybercab.
It's all very futuristic, isn't it? The futuristic-looking vehicle, which has no pedals or steering wheel, of course, dropped Elon Musk off at an event where he revealed all the details of this project.
Oh, there we go. And now at the same event, Elon Musk showed off Tesla's new black and white Optimus robots, which are apparently butlers. Although I believe that is just about...
There they are. There they are.
Oh,
He said these robots can do your household chores. They can walk your dog, mow your lawn, get the groceries, or just be your friend. Have a look at that.
That's the bit I'm worried about, just be your friend.
Imagine that robot just sitting around the table for you, playing games with you.
Yeah, until it
doing
gets
the washing
smarter
up,
than you.
doing the washing up, serving the drinks.
And tries to kill you.
We are living in the future.
A little bit too in the future, in my view. But joining us now to discuss this is tech expert Bobby Healy. Bobby, should we be excited about these advances?
We certainly should be. Great to see you both. We certainly should be. It's great to see Tesla's announcement yesterday. I think it's already the case that a number of companies, Waymo included, and even closer to home in London, there's a company called Wave AI that are building autonomous taxis, autonomous driving technology. Particularly driving, I think folks in Great Britain can expect to see that in the coming 1 or 2 years. And in the USA, of course, you can already get an autonomous taxi that drives you around with nobody behind the wheel. So yeah, it's exciting. I think it's going to be very positive for society in general. I think it's going to create jobs. I think it's going to make the roads much safer, and the start of really great change. And I'm looking forward.
You say it's going to be creating jobs. Of course, immediately I can see it losing some jobs, the jobs of taxi drivers, Uber drivers. Why pay someone to drive you around when the car can do it virtually for free? I can see this stuff becoming a lot cheaper for the consumer, but there is an industry of taxi drivers that is going to be wiped out in the next 5 years.
Yeah, there's certainly going to be some job displacement. I think just like any technology, I mean, the horse put people out of jobs, it displaced jobs, the steam engine displaced jobs. mobile phone displace jobs. Every disruptive technology will displace jobs, but ultimately it builds the economy, it makes the economy stronger, and ultimately economies adapt, and people, human brains, are always needed for various tasks. And I don't think that's going to change. I think we'll be able to, I mean, the workforce isn't big enough for a growing economy, particularly in Great Britain. So I would see, look, we're, yes, displacing some jobs of people that are behind a wheel doing a monotonous driving job, and they can do something much more productive with their brains.
Yeah, Bobby, I'm a bit worried about the humanoid friends. A little bit worrying. What if they mimic people's actions? They could become violent.
Yes.
They could learn domestic
Or get
violence.
jealous.
They could get jealous. Yes, they could get jealous like a pet, but more dangerous when
Yeah.
you're made of steel or whatever they're made of, aluminium. And they could gain some sort of consciousness.
Yeah, I wish. We still don't understand consciousness, and AI or large language models would be more appropriate description of them now are very, very dumb. They act clever. They seem clever. They certainly write better prose or poetry than I could do. But actually, they're just learning from what we've learned, and they learn no more. They're not conscious. They never will be. And ultimately, they're just going to make so many things better. You're going to have these humanoid robots at bedsides in hospitals, making people feel better, doing the jobs, or supplanting the jobs, or augmenting the jobs of doctors, nurses, and pick any other profession where people that embrace technology, obviously the younger generation more so maybe than people as old as me. But I think you don't need to fear anything here. There is no consciousness. There are no emotions in a robot. They make it look like a human.
Bobby, I mean, I've seen a lot of films, and of course, this is what they say always at the start.
Yeah, they
of
always
the film.
say it's okay.
As the city is swarming with all the robots doing the tasks, it's fine. They love doing the work. That's all grand. And then the plot of all of these films is the robots wake up.
Maybe I'm working for the robots actually, and maybe I'm their ally in taking over the world. No, but I'm a tech guy. I work with these models all the time, and I build a drone delivery business. I have flying robots delivering food, so I'm well aware.
But they don't want to be your friend, though, Bobby. This is what I'm worried about. These ones are designed to be your friend, so they're going to try and mimic empathy, aren't they? They're going to try and...
Yeah, I don't like that.
It's a bit
I must
freaky.
say, I don't like that. No, I don't like that. By all means, iron my shirt, hoover the floor, clean the windows, get out of the way, but don't pretend to enjoy a movie with me or have a conversation. I really don't think human race will go that way. We don't need it.
Tom
we
would
just
love
need
it.
Mundane stuff.
Tom can't wait to have a humanoid friend.
I do have conversations
Not you,
with
Emily.
ChatGPT with the new advanced voice mode, which is the sort of same basic sort of architecture of what this is all running off, large language models. I mean, this is the same advancement.
You like talking to a robot. Bobby, we're going to have to leave it there because we've run out of time, but thank you very much indeed for putting the case for these robots. But yes, I think you need to stop talking to ChatGPT, actually. I don't need to talk to chatbots.
Brightens my day. Bobby Healy, thank you so much for joining us. But it is interesting. Elon Musk said these could sell for the same price as a car. Car, robot butler. Car, robot butler. What would you choose?
A car for me, but anyway. Anyway, we're back in a tick. Stay with us.
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Well, plenty of showers across Scotland, but for many of us, there's going to be plenty of fine and sunny weather. It is going to be feeling cold through much of the day, though, and that's because we're still dragging in some air from the Arctic, which is moving its way across the country. We do have some weather systems just moving their way into Scotland, bringing that unsettled field here. So much more cloud across Scotland, perhaps at times western parts of Northern Ireland, some showers, longer spells of rain. This could turn heavy at times, perhaps even wintry across the Scottish peaks. But elsewhere across much of England and Wales, plenty of autumnal sunshine. And in lighter winds, it shouldn't feel quite as cold as yesterday, but it will still have that chilly feel in the air. And as we progress into the evening, those unsettled conditions are going to continue across Scotland's showers, longer spells of rain in northern parts, and it still could have a wintry element across higher ground. Still a few showers feeding into western parts of Northern Ireland, but elsewhere there's going to be plenty of clear skies to end the new week. Perhaps just a few showers drifting in towards southern coasts. Now, there will still be plenty of clear spells overnight, perhaps not quite as many as last night, so not getting quite as cold, but it is still going to be another chilly night. Still a chance we could see some pockets of frost around Wales, across the Midlands, and just anywhere where you really catch those longer clear spells. But moving into parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, that's where we're going to continue to see those blustery showers and those spells of rain. So an unsettled start here, and this rain is gradually going to slowly move its way through into the Scottish border, northern parts of England, so quite a wet day on offer here. Gradually clearing from the north, but still a chance of those wintry showers across higher ground, and still plenty of that autumnal sunshine to start the weekend. Still the chance of a few showers here and there, and it is going to be feeling cold, particularly in that brisk breeze.
We can expect clear skies, leading to a light and warm day ahead. Lovely. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You really could. Good luck.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. Every night from 11 p.m.
Some controversial film news. Someone has hired an actor who's white. What the hell is going on?
Let me just fix my hair. Let me just come on. So, Wuthering Heights film stirs controversy after white actor, he's white, chosen to play Heathcliff.
Is that your Humza Yusuf impersonation?
That is, that's my Chinese accent. Experts have gone, oh no, there's a lot of, in recent years, he's definitely black or mixed race because he was found in Liverpool. And as you know, everybody in Liverpool is black or mixed race.
No, I mean, have you read the novel?
God, no.
Right, well, I have. And the novel itself does say, quite explicitly, that he is dark-skinned. Yeah. That the implication is that he's of Romani origin. So he wouldn't be whiter than white, you know. So, I mean...
that's fine. Yeah.
So I wouldn't say that casting... But on the other hand...
This guy's Spanish. His origin's Spanish.
You remember when there was a black Anne Boleyn for a Channel 5 miniseries? That seems to be more egregious, because, I tell you what, Anne Boleyn definitely wasn't black.
You racist. No, I almost feel sorry in this story because you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't now. Because if they'd have, it's not like he's a bit of an anti-hero, right? It's not like a good all-round.
He's not a good guy.
So if you go, right, we definitely need to cast someone black for this. What? Why are you picking just black people to play someone with so many character flaws? Or you go, why?
Like they did with Darth Vader.
Yes, that's right.
He was played by the Green Cross Code Man. Okay. Just the voice was done by...
That's true. Yeah. Yes, it was the Green Cross Code Man. I wonder what they were saying there.
Have you ever seen the videos of the original audio of Star Wars?
No.
So you've got... I can't remember his name, but you've got the Green Cross Code Man going like, I find your lack of faith disturbing. Yeah. No, Luke, I am your father.
They should have left it as it was.
This is the difference to me. We're talking about Star Wars. You're like, oh, have you read Bronte, Wuthering, whatever?
She only wrote one novel, Josh. You could... do with the courtesy of reading it.
I'll read it straight after I finish your one.
And it's actually brilliant.
The People's Channel.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Friday, the 11th of October. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood.
Well, could this be the plan to save the NHS as the country braces for yet another NHS winter crisis? The government is planning to pay private hospitals to clear waiting lists for 2.5 million more patients. Would you support the public-private hospital plan, or is this beyond the pale for our NHS?
We'll reveal the moment hero post office staff managed to disarm a thief, wrestling a pistol out of his grasp and beating him to the ground. But it all begs the question, is shoplifting out of control?
And would you back laser shows over fireworks this bonfire night? Well, one Labour MP declares it's kinder to animals, safer for people and better for the environment. Is he a killjoy or has he got a killer idea?
And would you take a taxi with no driver? Elon Musk has announced new robo-taxis aimed at making minicabs cheaper than buses. He showed off a new humanoid robot as well called Optimus, which for the price of a car could soon be your own household robot butler.
That was an actual human in that suit, but yes, there are actual robots that could be your butler.
Nothing gets past the GB News audience.
No.
People were pointing out, just behind Elon Musk there, it looked like something slightly robotic. No, that was just a man in a spacesuit. We do have images, however, of what this Optimus robot looks like. Not available for sale yet, but take a look at these pictures, because this could soon be the sight in many households in the UK, in many bars, in many hospitals. I mean, you can imagine these robots, smart, general-purpose robots that Elon Musk is building, doing just about anything.
I don't like the sexism that's coming into the inbox on this. Neil says, better than a wife and easier to swap for a newer model. Well, that's nice, Neil. I hope your wife's not watching. Also, someone else said the robot might end up being your wife's best friend. Well, there you go. Works both ways, eh?
Well, there's one suggestion that maybe Musk has already put some of these robots out and about into the general environment. Starmer and Reeves are fairly robotic. Just saying, is that comment.
Always making it political. Christine says, I can see the benefits bill rocketing, laughing face. Yes, actually. I mean, this could put a hell of a lot of people out of work, couldn't it? I mean, if you don't need taxi drivers, if you don't need teachers, perhaps, if you don't need NHS workers, you don't need a nurse if you've got a robot, maybe. Who knows?
Or you get both. And then there's just so much greater supply. I mean, teachers augmented by, you know, the robots can sort out the sort of the average kids, and then the teachers can focus on the struggling kids and the very bright kids.
Do you think you'd prefer to have a humanoid friend than an actual human?
Do you know? No, for a number of reasons.
Are you sure?
But I think that having conversation with AI is actually, like, genuinely quite fun, because it's like talking to a world-renowned expert on any topic. If you want to know any fact, you can just chat to your phone. I mean, it's great.
Yeah, isn't that nice? What do you make of that? gbnews.com/your say. So should Tom stop talking to his chatbot?
Well, there's a question for the inbox.
Just talk to me. Just talk to me,
I look
Tom.
forward to seeing the answers. gbnews.com/your say. Much more to come on the programme, besides our back and forth over robots. We've got much more serious news too after your news headlines.
Good afternoon, I'm Sophia Wensler. These are your headlines from the GB newsroom. It's just gone 1 o'clock. Rescue efforts are underway after a deadly hurricane cut a destructive path across Florida, with at least 16 people known to have died. Hundreds have been rescued from apartments, while the Coast Guard saved a man clinging to a cool box. More than 4 million homes and businesses were left without power yesterday when Hurricane Milton struck. The hurricane is estimated to have caused tens of billions of dollars in damage, but officials say the worst-case scenario has been avoided. To the Middle East now, where at least 22 people have been killed and 117 others injured in an Israeli strike on a central neighbourhood in Beirut. That's according to the Lebanese Health Ministry. It's being reported a senior Hezbollah figure targeted in the attack is understood to have survived. Rescue efforts are now underway to search for survivors in the rubble. Meanwhile, Israel said Hezbollah fired more than 190 projectiles from Lebanon into Israel yesterday. Now, back in the UK, Sir Keir Starmer is not planning to hold a celebration to mark his first 100 days tomorrow. That's according to Number 10, who also declined to say if the first 100 days have been a success, saying instead it is for the public to judge that. It comes as the Prime Minister convened the first meeting of the Council of the Nations and Regions in Edinburgh today, but without Sue Gray. She was appointed as the Council's new special envoy, but Number 10 have said she's taking a break after the intense commentary about her work in government. They added that details of her new role as envoy to the regions will be published shortly. Meanwhile, Rachel Reeves has been forced to deny rumours capital gains tax could rise to 39%, its highest level on record, in the upcoming budget. That's as experts warn an increase could drive businesses out of the country. The Chancellor has opened the door to raising capital gains tax to plug a hole of up to £25 billion. Capital gains tax is paid on the profits made on the sales of assets, with the current rates ranging from 10% to 24%. It comes as the UK economy grew in August. That's after 2 months of stagnation. Official figures from the Office for National Statistics show gross domestic product rose by 0.2%. In other news, Robert Jenrick has told GB News that Nigel Farage's Reform UK is rattled by the prospect of him as Tory leader. Marking the second day of campaigning for the remaining 2 Tory leadership candidates, he vowed to cap immigration, leave the ECHR and defeat reform.
I'm going to be crystal clear. And as a result of that, and my record, the fact that I fought for these policies in government and ultimately chose to resign when I couldn't get any more and make the case in Parliament and the country for change, I'm going to hopefully bring those people back to us. Make the Conservative Party the natural home for small C Conservatives again. And you're already starting to see that. People joining my campaign who had previously said that they were going to vote reform. Nigel Farage himself sounds rattled. He is worried that if the party was led by someone like myself, with my record and my policies, we would make reform redundant. That's my job. That's what I need to do.
Now, the Met Police has confirmed 40 new allegations against Mohammed Al-Fayed after a public appeal. The accusations include sexual harassment, assault and rape, following a BBC documentary that aired last month. Harrods has confirmed that over 200 individuals are now in the process of settling claims with the business as the Metropolitan Police begins investigating new allegations. The force is also reviewing all previous reports from 1979 to 2013. Now, this year's Nobel Peace Prize has been awarded to the Japanese campaign group Nihon Hidankyu for their efforts to achieve a world free of nuclear weapons.
The Peace Prize for 2024 to the Japanese organization Nihon Hidankyu.
The organisation is made up of and represents survivors of atomic bombings, including Hiroshima, and aims to demonstrate through witness testimony that nuclear weapons must never be used. Japan's Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has called the award extremely meaningful. And finally, Elon Musk has unveiled a Tesla Cybercab without a steering wheel and an Optimus humanoid robot, announcing that the future is here. Tesla launched the much-anticipated robo-taxi at an event in Los Angeles overnight, with CEO Elon Musk saying drivers would be able to make passive income from the new developments. He confirmed that the Cybercab would go into production in 2026 and cost less than $30,000. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 9 minutes past 1. Now, could the private sector be the key to rescuing the NHS?
Well, the government is considering a plan to use private facilities for things like cancer checks, surgery and intensive care, all in a bid to reduce those very long waiting lists.
Yes, under the £1 billion plan submitted by private hospitals, the private sector could treat up to 2.5 million more patients, with some treatments starting in just weeks.
So could this be the major turning point for the NHS that we've been waiting for?
Well, we're joined by the former Health Secretary and former Chair of NHS Confederation, Stephen Dorrell. Stephen, thanks for joining us. This is an interesting proposal. It almost harks back to what we saw more of under the Tony Blair administration than anything we've seen in the interceding decade and a half.
Well, I agree that it's an interesting development. I think it's important not to imagine that this is a new idea never been followed through before, because as you quite rightly say, the private sector has always played a part in hospital treatment in the UK. And the important thing actually is a broader point than that, is to recognise the NHS has always been, since its foundation, a partnership between public and private sector. NHS pharmacy, for example, done on the high street, is all done in the private sector. NHS GPs, many of those, the majority of those, are private sector businesses contracted to the NHS. The idea that the NHS doesn't use the private sector is nonsense on stilts. It's simply not true.
I mean, it does beg the question, if the private sector is so efficient and would be so useful in cutting these waiting lists, why don't we go the whole hog and privatise the whole NHS?
Well, because that's to make the opposite mistake of being dogmatic about who owns the care provider. It doesn't actually matter. If you're a patient being treated on the health service, free and based on your clinical need, it doesn't actually matter to the patient whether the provider of the care is in the public sector, the private sector, or the third not-for-profit sector, which also plays an important part in the delivery of joined-up NHS care. What we should, I think, our approach should be to stop obsessing about whether it's public, private, or not-for-profit, and focus on the fact that the health service exists to deliver care to those who need it at the time that they need it and without regard to their ability to pay. That's the core principle that we all support.
It is interesting to see the sort of tentative details of this plan. Of course, things to be negotiated, nothing agreed by the government, a proposal, but about boosting supply, particularly of diagnostics. The government giving the private sector money so that then they build all of these diagnostic centres that can really bear down on those waiting lists. I suppose the question the government might ask is, why is it better that the private sector builds these new centres than the government itself?
It isn't better that the private sector or the public sector or the not-for-profit sector. What's better is that the capacity is expanded to meet the demand. The problem at the moment, in particular in diagnostics, and in fairness to the previous government, they were also going down this road. The problem in diagnostics is inadequate capacity. That is a problem that we can solve in the public sector to some degree, but why aim to do it only with public capital when we know, and we're going to hear from Rachel Reeves in the budget, that the pressures for public capital? Why confine yourself to only one answer when three answers can all contribute?
But I guess if you're going to have these new agreements with the private sector, I just don't understand why there's a limit on private sector involvement. Why not? If there's no difference, if there's no difference in the efficiency or the way of doing things, or one way is no better than the other, then why use the private sector at all? That's what I don't quite understand.
Why use the private? I mean, the answer is because there is capacity in the public sector, there is capacity in the private sector, and there is capacity in the not-for-profit sector. Why not use all three to solve a problem we all know exists, which is the problem of inadequate capacity to meet the demand for health and care services?
Now, we know that the private sector in the UK is vanishingly small, particularly in terms of private hospitals. I mean, for the most part, when people seek out private care, they're mostly seeking it from an NHS doctor that's doing it on the side. Whereas in a country like France, you have a third of hospitals are private hospitals, a third are charitable, and a third are run by the state. I mean, should we be aiming for a much more equal mix like France has?
You see, can I take you back to the assumption you make at the beginning, which is that the private sector plays a very small part in the delivery of NHS services? It's simply not true. The majority
I was talking about hospitals
services,
specifically.
OK, but it's important to make the point that the NHS has always been this partnership between public and private sector. Now, I agree with you that the health service should be more open to bringing in all forms of partners, whether it's the not-for-profit sector. One of the biggest private hospital providers is actually in the not-for-profit sector. Nuffield is a not-for-profit provider of hospital services to both the health service and to private patients who pay for the service. That surely is a much more adult way of going about it than obsessing about who owns the piece of land and the building in which the care is provided.
I guess one of the problems is that there are people who work within the NHS or manage areas of the NHS or who are part of unions associated with the NHS who do have a strong opinion on the use of private services, who do think it goes against some of the founding principles of the NHS. Ideologically, they don't like it. Do you think Labour are going to come up against quite a bit of friction?
Well, they may well come up against people who want to have that discussion. But there's a very simple answer to people who don't want to work for a private sector or a not-for-profit sector provider, which is that there's a very active state sector, and the state sector is short of staff, and therefore there's plenty of job opportunities there. If people want to work in the private sector, why would you want to stop them?
It's a fair point. Stephen Dorrell, thank you so much for joining us and talking through this potential avenue for the government to take, former chair of the NHS Confederation and, of course, former Health Secretary.
Very interesting indeed. Please do get your views in on the NHS. What do you think's going wrong? I mean, we have this conversation regularly, and there will be headlines coming up as ever. Every single winter, probably decades. Every winter, there is an impending winter crisis on the NHS. Capacity isn't enough. Waiting lists are out of control.
And
people aren't being seen. People are dying waiting.
There are more staff working for the NHS than ever in history.
This is what gets me. 1.3 million people working for our National Health Service. What is going wrong?
And more money being spent on it too. I mean, a 40% real terms uplift in spending compared to 2010. I mean, it's gone up from around 120 billion a year to more than 180 billion a year. I mean, these are huge numbers of increased funding. It just doesn't feel like it really has had all of that extra money. I mean, it's a real conundrum.
Yeah. I invite you to tell us your suggestions. Perhaps you've used the NHS recently, perhaps you had a fantastic experience, perhaps you had a really rubbish, a stinkingly awful experience. I mean, it is a bit of a postcode lottery, isn't it, when it comes to the NHS? Some hospitals appear to be far more efficient than others. Is it down to poor management? Is it down to resources? Is it down to some staff being better than others?
Or
What's going
demographics.
wrong?
Some areas have many more people who are in need of care than other areas. But much more to come on Good Afternoon Britain here on GB News, including the BBC has announced a review into its workplace culture, focusing on preventing abuse of power. This after a number of high-profile scandals.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
We shouldn't have to do this, Rebecca. These men should have been compensated long ago.
They shouldn't have to fight for recognition. And this is what's happened over the last 72 years. So all the way through from the test through to the present day, they've known that something happened to them. They've seen what they've been through, their medical conditions, the fact that many of these servicemen died well before their time. And they were ignored in a way that other countries didn't ignore their similar testing veterans. So other nuclear powers across the world, the US, for example, compensated and recognised their nuclear testing veterans many, many years ago. Yet, unfortunately, successive governments in the UK failed to do that. After the long campaign for medallic recognition, finally, these servicemen received medallic recognition, but it came in a jiffy bag in the post, which is not the way to honour the service that these men gave to our country. There needs to be an understanding and an uncovering of the truth of what they actually went through. They've been fighting for many years for access to their medical records, for example, urine and blood tests that they know were taken during their service. But when many of these families have tried to access their records, these test results seem to be missing, and there's no explanation as to why this has happened.
What basis does the Ministry of Defence say it's not our responsibility?
Well, we know from other studies across the world and subsequent studies, it showed, staggeringly that these men were exposed to the same amount of radiation as clean-up workers at Chernobyl.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Conservative MPs have finally chosen their top 2 for the leadership. And now, it's over to the members. Join me, Christopher Hope, on Thursday as Kevin Badenoch and Robert Jenrick are quizzed by Conservative Party members and myself at our GB News leadership event.
And afterwards, join me, Patrick Christys, with a live studio audience and a star panel as we discuss what it means for the Conservative Party and what it means for you. Decision Time, the race to lead, from 7 p.m. this Thursday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
These have finally chosen their top 2 for the leadership. And now, it's over to the members. Join me, Christopher Hope, on Thursday as Kevin Badenoch and Robert Jenrick are quizzed by Conservative Party members and myself at our GB News leadership event.
And afterwards, join me, Patrick Christys, with a live studio audience and a star panel as we discuss what it means for the Conservative Party and what it means for you. Decision Time, the race to lead, from 7 p.m. this Thursday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, there you go. You won't want to miss that. Welcome back to Good Afternoon Britain. It's now 1:22, and the BBC, they've announced the details of a review into their workplace culture.
Comes after a string of scandals involving high-profile presenters and TV shows that have rocked the corporation in recent months.
Yes, well, the BBC says the review will have a particular focus on preventing abuse of power and ensuring everyone at the corporation conducts themselves in line with its values.
Well, for more on this, we're joined now by GB News political correspondent Olivia Utley. Olivia, this is a timely review. Many will say well needed.
Well, yeah, I mean, this isn't surprising. When the BBC gets itself into trouble, it does tend to launch these reviews. There was a similar one back in 2013. And in fact, the same organisation, the same consultancy will be leading this review as led that review back in 2013. That's a company called Change Associates. Now, this review is specifically going to look into bullying. It's specifically going to be looking into whether the people at the BBC, the personnel at the BBC, understand the consequences of bullying. This is obviously in the wake of the Jermaine Gina scandal, the Hugh Edwards scandal, and the ongoing Strictly Come Dancing scandal, although Pernice categorically denies that there was any bullying. Whether this review will make any difference remains to be seen. As I say, a similar review was conducted in 2013, and the review now will look into whether the changes recommended in that review were enacted in full. The BBC is aiming to report back on this in the spring of next year, but if the current rate of scandals is anything to go by, they could have a few more under their belt by then. I think quite a lot of the victims of these scandals might feel as though the BBC isn't really moving fast enough with this, and they will worry that perhaps this review today is rather similar to reviews that we've seen in the past, which, if the behaviour of the last year is anything to go by, don't seem to have made that much of a difference.
I mean, according to, I'm just looking here, apparently 21,000 people work for the BBC. It's going to be a big challenge, a big piece of work to investigate the culture at the entire corporation. Do we have any idea of how much this might cost?
Really interesting question. I've been trying to find out exactly how much it'll cost. There doesn't seem to yet be any information out there about that. As you say, it is going to be a really big review. Change Associates is a large consultancy. It's going to be led by the founder of Change Associates, who presumably commands a pretty big pay-by-the-hour sum. And we're not expecting the report to come out until the spring of next year, so about 6 or 7 months' time. That's a lot of work for quite a senior team, extending over quite a long period. So I think we can expect this to be quite costly. In terms of the terms of reference for the review, the language is sort of relatively surprisingly woolly. You've sort of got whether there are practical further steps the BBC can take to ensure that the BBC understands and commits to our values and code of conduct. Well, what exactly does that mean? It isn't totally clear. Also, how the BBC can ensure the consequences of inappropriate and behaviour and abuse of power are understood by everyone. Again, there don't seem to be any concrete terms of reference here. So it could be that quite a lot of money is spent and there isn't much detail in place.
And Olivia, as you mention, this is a rerun of an exercise carried out 11 years ago by the same company trying to find out the same things. I mean, clearly, it didn't work then. Why might it work now?
Well, I think that's what there will be mutterings about that at the BBC. Now, the review is startlingly similar, really, to the review that was carried out back in 2013. That was a review of the workplace behaviour. This is a review of BBC culture. Both looked at the frame of reference around bullying allegations and how allegations of bullying are dealt with. The one back in 2013 took out gagging clauses from the BBC, but of course lots of people at the BBC feel that, particularly in the case of Hugh Edwards, it did feel as though people were being silenced for part of that scandal. So there will be a review into the review, if you like. Part of this review will encompass looking back at the review in 2013 and seeing whether those changes were actually implemented in full. But as you say, Tom, if not much changed back 11 years ago, then why exactly would it change now?
Thank you very much indeed, Olivia Utley, our political correspondent. Thank you very much. Outside the BBC. Yeah, I'm just looking at the 2013 one.
Yeah.
And yes, you know, the classic sort of recommendations, a confidential helpline for support with bullying, reworking the bullying and harassment policy in conjunction with unions, relaunching the BBC values as an integral part of the vision, providing greater support for managers, providing mentors, etc. It's going to be the same thing again, isn't it? Maybe a few workshops thrown in, you know, on how to be nice to each other.
I can almost imagine 11 years after this review, they'll need another one.
People just want accountability, don't they? I mean, I think it's very difficult to completely change a culture at such a huge organisation. I think people just want the wrong-uns to be kicked out in a timely fashion, don't they?
Yeah.
Pretty much.
I think so.
I think so. Anyway, in other news, Sir Keir Starmer's decision to accept freebies, including clothes and glasses, would be understandable if he were a woman, according to Carol Vorderman.
Well, Vorderman, who publicly celebrated Labour's landslide win in July, said it was a rookie error for the Prime Minister to accept donations of clothes from Labour peer Lord Ali.
But she said, I could understand it more if he were a woman. This is interesting, isn't it, Tom? Do you think that's true? You know, women. So, for example, you know, working here with you, I have to wear a different frock every day.
That's true.
And you just wear the same old suit and change your tie.
I barely change my tie, to be honest. I could probably get away with wearing exactly this for a week, and I don't know if anyone would notice. I think that's a fair point.
I mean, there's truth to the fact that I think women have to spend more on their wardrobe, but I don't think Carol's point really stands. I mean, I don't think it would be OK if he was a female leader of the opposition.
Because I think surely the point is not how necessary the items of clothing are, but why is someone buying them for you, and what is that meant to get for them? And it's the same with all sorts of freebies. I'm not sure that there is a sort of moral difference for a donation just because there is a greater need for that.
Because you need it more. Yeah, I take that, yeah. So if you were on a lower salary and couldn't afford as nicer clothes, therefore taking the freebies from a donor would be fine. But if you're rich enough to afford them yourselves, then that's bad.
If anything, if you're on a lower salary, you're more in hock to the donor.
True. That is actually very true, actually. I mean, in theory, anyway. But Carol Vorderman, she's having a hard time at the moment, isn't she, Tom? I mean, she was the biggest cheerleader for Labour when it was in the during the general election campaign. She was vicious towards the Conservatives and their record, and now she's rather upset, particularly about the winter fuel payments and now all this freebie stuff.
Bit of buyer's remorse?
Bit of buyer's remorse, maybe. Would she admit that? Would she admit that? I don't know. I don't know, the woman. But anyway, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up on today's show. It has shoplifting now completely got out of control. I'm going to show you.
It's 1:30. These are your headlines from the GB newsroom. In Florida, the clear-up mission has begun in the aftermath of the deadly Hurricane Milton, with at least 16 people known to have died. Hundreds have been rescued from apartments, while a Coast Guard saved a man clinging to a cool box. More than 4 million homes and businesses were left without power yesterday when the hurricane struck. It's estimated to have caused tens of billions of dollars in damage, but officials say the worst-case scenario has been avoided. Now to the Middle East, where at least 22 people have been killed and 117 others injured in an Israeli strike on a central neighbourhood in Beirut. That's according to the Lebanese Health Ministry. It's being reported a senior Hezbollah figure targeted in the attack is understood to have survived. Meanwhile, Israel said Hezbollah fired more than 190 projectiles from Lebanon into Israel yesterday. And back in the UK, Sir Keir Starmer is not planning to hold a celebration to mark his first 100 days tomorrow. That's according to Number 10, who also declined to say if the first 100 days have been a success, saying instead it is for the public to judge that. It comes as the Prime Minister convened the first Council of Nations and Regions in Edinburgh today without Sue Gray. She was appointed as the Council's new special envoy, but Number 10 have said she's taking a break after the intense commentary about her work in government. In other news, almost 2/3 of people in England and Wales want assisted dying to be legalised for terminally ill adults. That's according to a new survey. The survey by the Policy Institute and the Complex Life and Death Decisions Group at King's College London found some 63% of the adults questioned supported changing the law. The new findings come just days before Labour MP Kim Ledbetter is due to introduce a private member's bill seeking to expand choice at the end of life. And finally, this year's Nobel Prize has been awarded to Japanese campaign group Nihon Hidankyu for their efforts to achieve a world free of nuclear weapons.
The Peace Prize for 2024 to the Japanese organization Nihon Hidankyu.
The organisation is made up of and represents survivors of atomic bombings, including Hiroshima, and aims to demonstrate through witness testimony that nuclear weapons must never be used. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Well, plenty of showers across Scotland, but for many of us, there's going to be plenty of fine and sunny weather. It is going to be feeling cold through much of the day, though, and that's because we're still dragging in some air from the Arctic, which is moving its way across the country. We do have some weather systems just moving their way into Scotland, bringing that unsettled feel here. So much more cloud across Scotland, perhaps at times western parts of Northern Ireland, some showers, longer spells of rain. This could turn heavy at times, perhaps even wintry across the Scottish peaks. But elsewhere across much of England and Wales, plenty of autumnal sunshine. And in lighter winds, it shouldn't feel quite as cold as yesterday, but it will still have that chilly feel in the air. And as we progress into the evening, those unsettled conditions are going to continue across Scotland's showers, longer spells of rain in northern parts, and it still could have a wintry element across higher ground. Still a few showers feeding into western parts of Northern Ireland, but elsewhere there's going to be plenty of clear skies to end the new week. Perhaps just a few showers drifting in towards southern coasts. Now, there will still be plenty of clear spells overnight, perhaps not quite as many as last night, so not getting quite as cold, but it is still going to be another chilly night. Still a chance we could see some pockets of frost around Wales, across the Midlands, and just anywhere where you really catch those longer clear spells. But moving into parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, that's where we're going to continue to see those blustery showers and those spells of rain. So an unsettled start here, and this rain is gradually going to slowly move its way through into the Scottish border, northern parts of England, so quite a wet day on offer here. Gradually clearing from the north, but still a chance of those wintry showers across higher ground, and still plenty of that autumnal sunshine to start the weekend. Still the chance of a few showers here and there, and it is going to be feeling cold, particularly in that brisk breeze.
The latest GB News travel. I'm John Vincent. Queues on the M90 southbound in Edinburgh at junction 1A Kirkliston. Queues on the M62 eastbound in Manchester. There's a lane closed for a broken down vehicle between junction 19 Hayward, heading towards junction 20, the A627M. Queues on the M14 northbound in Warwickshire. It's all due to a traffic problem at junction 15, the Warwick bypass. Severe delays in Essex. The M11 southbound has been closed for an accident between junction 8 Bishop Stortford, heading towards junction 7A Harlow North. Diversions are signposted, but those routes are also looking pretty congested. Long delays on the M3 northbound in Hampshire. There's 2 lanes closed for an accident between junction 10 Winchester, heading towards junction 9 the Winnell roundabout. And long delays on the M5 northbound in Devon. There's a lane closed for a broken down coach at junction 27 Tiverton. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 36 minutes past 1. Now, a High Court judge has praised the bravery of post office staff who managed to disarm a thief who tried to rob their workplace.
Yeah, it's quite dramatic. This footage here shows the thief brandishing an imitation gun. They didn't know it was an imitation gun, described as indistinguishable from a real weapon. They demanded that one of the workers fill a bag with money.
Well, you can see then the staff at the Nissa local store in Dunfermline jump in, disarming the thief, managing to wrestle the pistol, what they thought was a real pistol, out of his grasp, and then beat him to the ground.
Yes, it's quite a contrast to some shoplifting episodes I've seen recently, where people just sort of walk in and walk out, take what they want and leave. Anyway,
look at that action.
Yeah, that's pretty
proper.
dramatic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sadly, this is an increasingly common occurrence. So is theft like this in the UK completely out of control? And should you, as a shopkeeper or a shop assistant, actually bother taking, these things into your own hands?
Well, joining us to discuss this is the retired Scotland Yard detective Mike Neville. Mike, first of all, your reaction to this pretty extraordinary footage.
Well, I mean, they're very brave, aren't they? And I think it comes out of increasing frustration that, people just coming into a shop and taking what they want. But, of course, I'd never recommend this. I mean, I dealt with a case in Australia, helped solve a murder in Australia, where similar sort of circumstance in a jewellery shop. An elderly man, they started fighting a drug addict over a $25 ring, and he was stabbed through the heart. So these people just don't care. You've got drug addicts who don't think of the next hour in their mind, the next 30 minutes, and they will just kill somebody if they can. Unfortunately here, as you said, it was an imitation firearm. But well done, the shopkeepers and the lady behind the till there. They did a great job in detaining him and stopping doing anything else. But other people have got to be careful if you ever consider doing this.
I mean, this chap here, this man, was trying to get the money from the till. But when it comes to people just walking into a shop, picking up what they want and leaving, they seem to go undisrupted a lot. I mean, I won't say where or when, but recently I was in a shop and there were 3 separate shoplifting incidents while I was in there. The staff couldn't do anything, really, because why on earth would they want to put themselves in danger? There weren't any police officers around who just walk in, take what they want and just walk out as if nothing's happened. I mean, it's actually crazy.
It is mad, but it's the shop workers will be even told, they'll be told, do not intervene, because if they get injured, they won't be insured and things like that. But the real problem here is that the character in Dunfermline there, that drug addict who did the attempt robbery there, he had a previous conviction for a similar offence. I have no doubts that he's got probably 20, 30 convictions for different crimes which involve, because it was all to do with the drugs debt. And a lot of the people involved will be drug addicts. And if these people were put in prison for the substantial sentences, then they couldn't be doing these crimes. If he'd been put in prison for a proper sentence when he did brandish the gun the first time, he wouldn't have been in that shop frightening people and committing that robbery. That's what we need, proper prison sentences for people who commit lots of crime.
It's just kids as well. I mean, just kids coming back from school on their way home, just walking into a shop, picking up some sweets, a sandwich and a drink, and just walking straight out. I mean, if they get away with that, will that encourage them to then pursue more criminal activity?
You're absolutely right, because what's happening now, of course, is that people are seeing, as you've seen, that you can just walk into the shop and take what you want. And I spoke to two old ladies who work in a shop near me, and she said every day the same people come in, steal the same things, and they're stealing the goods to the value of what these ladies are working a 10-hour shift for.
Yeah.
You know, and so society starts to break down when following the rules is the stupid option. And that's why we need to get a grip of this crime, because it may seem low level, but as you say, it leads on to other things, because when somebody does try to stop them, then they become violent because they feel entitled to steal, and it becomes a robbery. And that's where society is in a bad place.
And Mike, I'm so glad you mentioned that so often it's the same people who are known to the shopkeeper, people who might even, their picture might be up in the shop, and yet they come in, swan in, and the police don't do enough because it's below a certain, I think it's a £200 threshold where the police just say, oh, forget it. And it is so frustrating. We come back to this point time and time again on this show. So often, such a large proportion of all crime is done by such a small proportion of criminals. There was a remarkable case of a car crash in Ireland where some people who happened to be burglars were killed accidentally in a car crash. And the number of burglaries in that area of Ireland completely collapsed, all because these 3 or so people were taken out by chance. I mean, what can be done? What can be done to find and detain or dissuade these repeat offenders?
Well, you're absolutely right. So the 9% of people are classified as hyper-prolific criminals. So those 9% commit 50% of all crimes. So they need to be targeted. What the police don't use, for example, is CCTV. Nearly every one of those thefts, many people, 40% of people have a CCTV or Ring doorbells in their homes. If these things were used properly with other forensics like DNA and fingerprints, you could identify these people for not one crime, several. So when they go to the court, they can't just say, "Oh, it was all a big mistake." No, it's not a big mistake. You've done 10, 20 or 30 of these thefts or burglaries, and then they should be locked up. And we should have no one on the street who's got 20 previous convictions. There are people wandering around who've got 100 convictions. Now, that's 100 times they've been caught. That means they've probably done about 10,000 crimes. And it's me, you, our families and society who have to put up with the misery that these people cause. And while they're behind bars, they can't cause that misery. It's simple, really.
Well, that is quite simple. Mike Neville, thank you very much, as ever. Retired Scotland Yard detective. Great to get your take on this. I mean, Sharon says we have this every day at our store, and there's nothing we can do. Police will not prosecute unless the goods are of a value of over £200. Exactly what you said. I mean, it's so depressing. If now being a shop worker, a shop assistant, a shop owner is now a dangerous job. I mean, it's just crazy, isn't it?
And these burglars, these thieves, are not stupid. They will go and they'll steal £150 worth of goods. They'll steal £180 worth of goods because they know that then the police won't chase after them. I mean, that threshold is, in my view, a complete disgrace. I mean, why have we decriminalised a certain level of theft in this country? What an extraordinary thing to have done.
Or just these teenagers who think are so entitled that they think they can just walk into a shop and just take what they fancy. Just take it. Oh, I fancy some Percy Pigs today. Oh, I fancy some Starbursts. No.
And
anyway.
Yeah, seeing that all that CCTV footage does sort of boil the blood, really.
Yeah. Another question for you today is, would you back laser shows over fireworks this bonfire night? We're asking because one Labour MP says it's kinder to animals, safer for people and better for the environment. So is this Labour MP a killjoy, or does he have a killer idea? That's the question next.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Please tell me that we're British. In our darkest hour, we can work around this. The beer will still be flowing at Christmas. Tell me, please.
Martin, without using bad language, there's no words to describe that this is another major blow to the hospitality sector. I wake up every day with anxiety thinking, what's going to happen to us now? Oh, my God, now the weather's against us. Not only are the government absolutely battering us, then the weather's now hitting us as well.
Kate Stewart, this can only mean one thing. Prices, once again, going through the roof.
And there's nothing we can do. We have on costs. We have to buy from the brewery. We have the VAT. We have then the VAT, what we take. It is an absolute nightmare To be in the pub game now, Martin, is very, very difficult. And there's no light at the end of the tunnel. Everything just keeps hammering us from every different direction. And obviously, we have to pass that on to the customers, then price increases. There's nothing we can do. We don't want to sell beer at an inflated price. We want it as cheap as possible to get people through them doors. But we have no option. They're going to go up again in the new budget. You know, there's no help for us. What are we supposed to do, Martin, except the only option is to close the doors and say, enough is enough. We can't do this anymore. I absolutely cry my eyes out having to put the prices up because you think, oh, my God, people are just going to turn away and walk. But we can't swallow the costs all the time, Martin. It's impossible for us to do because we will go bankrupt. There has to be, there's inflation getting hammered on us yet again, and we have to pass it on. I feel it when I take my children out for something to eat. You're like, wow, that has just cost a fortune. But what is the answer? The answer is the government needs to look at saving the hospitality sector and stop being so greedy in everything that they take away from us, or there won't be pubs.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark meets at My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is now 13 minutes to 2. And a Labour Member of Parliament has backed a report calling for laser light shows to replace fireworks on bonfire night.
Well, the report by the Social Market Foundation found that more than 60% of the public would support fully or partially replacing fireworks with alternatives like lasers and like drones.
Well, in a foreword to the report, Labour MP Andrew Pakes argued that these alternatives would be kinder to animals, safer for people and better for the environment.
OK, well, we're joined now by the report's co-author and senior researcher at Social Market Foundation, Danny Payne. Danny, thank you very much indeed for coming on the show. So what's the case for these laser shows, then, over fireworks? People love the fireworks, don't they?
Absolutely, people do love fireworks, and we're not calling for a complete replacement of fireworks, but we do think that there is great opportunities to be utilising alternatives more, and the public do support this. So about 90% of the public would like us to be using alternatives more, and they can be a great boost for local economies in Japan, where these displays are very sophisticated. One display in one city can bring in hundreds of millions of pounds to the local economy, equivalent to Taylor Swift coming to Wembley. So as well as being safer for animals, safer for children, they also pose a great kind of economic advantage that if we could invest in these alternatives, could be a win-win for everyone.
Do we have a risk here of just trying to be too safe? I mean, shouldn't children be exposed to a certain level of risk, of danger, of adventure? I mean, are we coddling ourselves up in too much cotton wool?
Absolutely, and I think that's a concern that's shared by others as well. Our polling found that only 7% of the public wanted to completely ban fireworks. So we aren't advocating for a complete ban of fireworks. They're culturally important for many, and for many they're an important part of British tradition. And if all of the recommendations in the report were enacted, you would still be able to let off small rockets and Roman candles, sparklers in your back garden.
Hang on, Danny. Only small rockets? What about the massive ones that go absolutely kaboom?
Kaboom.
Absolutely, and local councils and professional displays should continue to use those in safe environments. I think it's important to note that we have very weak restrictions on fireworks compared to other countries like Australia, Germany, Scotland. And these other countries that have slightly stricter restrictions still have amazing displays with big, loud fireworks. They're just more controlled, done by professionals.
Yeah.
So people can still enjoy these displays.
Danny, just lastly, Grumpy Grandad, one of our regular viewers, has got in touch, and he says fireworks are traditional, part of our culture, so we should do everything to preserve fireworks on bonfire night. It's the rest of the year that's the problem. They end up going off all hours where he is. That's the issue, isn't it? I mean, if it was just bonfire night or very special occasions, then it would be fine. It's when you've got a quivering pet in your living room who's absolutely terrified, or a baby who's crying their eyes out because of the fireworks. Because, you know, everyone can prepare for 1 or 2 nights of the year. But sometimes it feels like it's the whole autumn and winter that we're setting these things off.
I completely agree, and 34% of the British public would support them being limited to just special cultural occasions. And I think that this is a really good area to explore. Of course, if you know when they're going to happen, you can prepare, you can make sure your animals are safe and that they're in a quiet environment, and you can prepare your children as well. So I think that that is a very important area that government should be exploring.
You'd just have them being set off any day, willy-nilly, wouldn't you? I think I'm with the 34% there. Danny Payne, thank you very much indeed for your time. You're from the Social Market Foundation that did this report into our views on fireworks and what could be an alternative.
Here's the thing, I grew up in Cambridge, where each of the colleges have a May ball in May and June. And so you had, on many nights of the year, you'd have a firework display over there, a firework display over there. It's great.
And
it's
the
wonderful.
cows would just whimper.
No, the cows are stoic, standing in the fields.
Anyway, talking about things that are in the sky, sky gazers across the UK were treated to a stunning sight as the Northern Lights returned last night, visible across huge parts of the country.
And to the delight of astronomers, the Northern Lights may also be visible today and tomorrow across some parts of the UK.
And have you noticed how our set has changed dramatically?
Magical.
Magical, yes. This year, the famous Aurora Borealis has made a couple of appearances as far south in the UK, with many snapping, stunning pictures. It is absolutely beautiful. I've only seen the Northern Lights in Norway.
Ooh.
And it does look pretty fantastic. There is something quite magical. You can see why people thought it was magic.
Yes, magic or sort of...
supernatural.
But the phenomena is influenced by geomagnetic storms, of which the Met Office says there was a severe one due to reach the Earth last night. And these are some of the pictures that people have been able to take, not with any special equipment, but just their mobile phones.
It is true, actually. The aurora does look more impressive through a camera lens, I must say. You take these extraordinary pictures and actually in real life it's quite subtle in the sky. Sometimes it can be absolutely can be, look seriously bright in the sky, but other times it's very subtle. But with a camera lens...
Oh, yeah.
It's very stark.
Especially a modern smartphone that does the sort of brightening of the night sky. But no, it is remarkable to see that these images can be taken with mobile phones. If you managed to take one last night, if you saw the Northern Lights light up your garden, why not send us one? We'll be looking out at the
I'm liking this. This can stay.
This can stay, absolutely. It's gorgeous. But we'll see you in just a few minutes. It's your weather coming up and also much more news beyond.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Well, plenty of showers across Scotland, but for many of us, there's going to be plenty of fine and sunny weather. It is going to be feeling cold through much of the day, though, and that's because we're still dragging in some air from the Arctic, which is moving its way across the country. We do have some weather systems just moving their way into Scotland, bringing that unsettled field here. So much more cloud across Scotland, perhaps at times western parts of Northern Ireland, some showers, longer spells of rain. This could turn turn heavy at times, perhaps even wintry across the Scottish peaks. But elsewhere across much of England and Wales, plenty of autumnal sunshine. And in lighter winds, it shouldn't feel quite as cold as yesterday, but it will still have that chilly feel in the air. And as we progress into the evening, those unsettled conditions are going to continue across Scotland. Showers, longer spells of rain in northern parts, and it still could have a wintry element across higher ground. Still a few showers feeding into western parts of Northern Ireland, but elsewhere there's going to be plenty of clear skies to end the new week. Perhaps just a few showers drifting in towards southern coasts. Now, there will still be plenty of clear spells overnight, perhaps not quite as many as last night, so not getting quite as cold, but it is still going to be another chilly night. Still a chance we could see some pockets of frost around Wales, across the Midlands, and just anywhere where you really catch those longer clear spells. But moving into parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, that's where we're going to continue to see those blustery showers and those spells of rain. So an unsettled start here, and this rain is gradually going to slowly move its way through into the Scottish border, northern parts of England, so quite a wet day on offer here. Gradually clearing from the north, but still a chance of those wintry showers across higher ground, and still plenty of that autumnal sunshine to start the weekend. Still the chance of a few showers here and there, and it is going to be feeling cold, particularly in that brisk breeze.
We can expect clear skies leading to a light.
There's just luck.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Friday, the 11th of October. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
Could this plan save the NHS this winter? As the country braces for yet another winter crisis, the government is planning, potentially, to pay private hospitals to clear waiting lists for 2.5 million patients. Would you support the public-private hospital plan, or is it beyond the pale for our NHS?
And where's Sue Gray? Have you seen her? The Prime Minister's chaired the first ever Council of the Nations and Regions in Edinburgh today, but Sue Gray, the newly appointed envoy for the nations and regions, is absolutely nowhere to be seen.
And more allegations against Al Fayed. The Met Police are investigating 40 new allegations against the former Harrods boss, including sexual harassment, assault and rape.
And would you take a taxi with no driver? Well, Elon Musk, he's announced new robo-taxis aimed at making minicabs cheaper than buses. He also showed off a rather creepy humanoid robot called Optimus, which for the price of a car could soon be your own household robot butler. Do you need that in your life?
Sue Gray has gone complete walkabouts. It's fascinating that the week she was appointed to this supposed new important role of being the envoy for the nations and regions, whatever that means, then there's a big meeting of the nations and regions, the first of the Council of the Nations and Regions. She's not there.
Yeah, I mean, on the media around this morning, I can't remember who it was, one of the representatives of the government, basically said she's had a lot on her plate. Been a stressful period. Of course, someone like Sue Gray may well not want to be making headlines. She's never been in a position where she's been, directly accountable to the public in that way. She wasn't elected as such. So perhaps she's having a hard time. And, as we discussed the other day, has she been a fall guy, a fall woman for Keir Starmer?
That's not what I've heard from Westminster. I mean, during the time of the Sue Gray report into Boris Johnson...
Did she love it?
All of the word on the street was she was revelling in her newfound fame.
OK, well, she doesn't like the negative headlines.
Puffed up like a canary.
Doesn't like the negative headlines.
Oh, perhaps. It's different if you've got
no one likes negative headlines, do they, really?
Oh, I don't
Unless
know.
you're some kind of sadist.
Perhaps. I struggle to think. Why else do politicians go into the job, right? You have to sort of either have a thick skin or some sort of perverse, all publicity's good publicity attitude.
But you would have thought Sue Gray, who's been newly appointed with this envoy of the nations and the regions job, would be at the summit of the nations and the regions. But alas, no, she hasn't made it. Is she going to take up this new job? Has it been agreed? Has the contract been signed? Is it a part-time gig? Has she got a bit of a wait before she gets stuck into that job? What exactly is going on?
Is it a real job?
Has he got a grip on what's going on?
When Theresa May was struggling to win votes because her slim to no parliamentary majority, what she did was she created trade envoys.
Right.
So lots of backbench Conservative MPs became trade envoys to various countries. They weren't real jobs. They would go on sort of a trip a year or something, and they didn't have an office, didn't have staff. I wonder, has Sue Gray been palmed off with one of these pretend non-jobs?
And then she's not even at the summit for the job. Or the name of the job, anyway. I think you'd be a good trade envoy. Anyway, we're wittering on. Please do get in touch about everything we're discussing. gbnews.com/your say is the way to do so. But first, the headlines with Sophia.
Tom, Emily, thank you. Good afternoon. These are your headlines. It's just gone 2 o'clock. In Florida, the clear-up has begun in the aftermath of the deadly Hurricane Milton, with at least 16 people known to have died. Hundreds have been rescued from apartments, while a Coast Guard saved a man clinging to a cool box off the Gulf of Mexico. More than 4 million homes and businesses were left without power yesterday when the hurricane struck. It's estimated to have caused tens of billions of dollars in damage, but officials say the worst-case scenario has been avoided. To the Middle East now, where at least 22 people have been killed and 117 others injured in an Israeli strike on a central neighbourhood in Beirut. That's according to the Lebanese Health Ministry. It's being reported a senior Hezbollah figure targeted in the attack is understood to have survived. Rescue efforts are now underway to search for survivors in the rubble. Meanwhile, Israel said Hezbollah fired more than 190 projectiles from Lebanon into Israel yesterday. Back in the UK, Sir Keir Starmer is not planning to hold a celebration to mark his first 100 days tomorrow. That's according to Number 10, who also declined to say if the first 100 days have been successful, instead saying it is for the public to judge that. It comes as the Prime Minister convened the first meeting of the Council of the Nations and Regions in Edinburgh today, but without Sue Gray. She was appointed as the Council's new special envoy, but Number 10 have said she's taking a break after the intense commentary about her work in government. They added that details of her new role as envoy to the regions will be published shortly. Meanwhile, Rachel Reeves has been forced to deny rumours capital gains tax could rise to 39%, its highest level on record, in the upcoming budget. That's as experts warn an increase could drive businesses out of the country. The Chancellor has opened the door to raising capital gains tax to plug a hole of up to £25 billion. Capital gains tax is paid on the profits made on the sales of assets, with the current rates ranging from 10% to 24%. Meanwhile, the UK economy grew in August. That's after 2 months of stagnation. Official figures from the Office for National Statistics showed that gross domestic product rose by 0.2%. In other news, Robert Jenrick has told GB News that Nigel Farage's Reform UK is rattled by the prospect of him as Tory leader. Marking the second day of campaigning for the remaining 2 Tory leadership candidates, he vowed to cap immigration, leave the ECHR and defeat reform.
I'm going to be crystal clear. And as a result of that, and my record, the fact that I fought for these policies in government and ultimately chose to resign when I couldn't get any more and make the case in Parliament and the country for change, I'm going to hopefully bring those people back to us. Make the Conservative Party the natural home for small C Conservatives again. And you're already starting to see that. People joining my campaign who had previously said that they were going to vote Reform. Nigel Farage himself sounds rattled. He is worried that if the party was led by someone like myself, with my record and my policies, we would make Reform redundant. That's my job. That's what I need to do.
Now, the Met Police has confirmed 40 new allegations against Mohammed Al-Fayed after a public appeal. The accusations include sexual harassment, assault and rape, following a BBC documentary that aired last month. Harrods has confirmed that over 200 individuals are now in the process of settling claims with the business as the Metropolitan Police begins investigating new allegations. The force is also reviewing all previous reports from 1979 to 2013. This year's Nobel Peace Prize has been awarded to Japanese campaign group Nihon Hidonkyu for their efforts to achieve a world free of nuclear weapons.
The Peace Prize for 2024 to the Japanese organization Nihon Hidankyu.
The organisation is made up and represents survivors of atomic bombings, including Hiroshima, and aims to demonstrate through witness testimony that nuclear weapons must never be used. Japan's Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has called the award extremely meaningful. And finally, the Northern Lights returned to the UK sky last night, visible across huge parts of the country. This year, the famous Aurora Borealis has made a couple of appearances as far south as the UK, with many snapping stunning pictures. The phenomena is influenced by geomagnetic storms, of which the Met Office said there was a severe one due to reach Earth last night. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 9 minutes past 2. Now, could the private sector be the key to rescuing the NHS?
Well, the government is considering that. A plan to use private facilities for cancer checks, surgery, intensive care, all in a bid to reduce our very long waiting lists.
Well, under the £1 billion plan submitted by private hospitals, the private sector could treat up to 2.5 million more patients, with some treatment starting in weeks.
So could this be a major turning point for the NHS, or is this beyond the pale for those who want the NHS to stay purely public?
Well, we're joined now by junior doctor Basha Mukherjee. Basha, thank you so much for joining us. This is a proposal about boosting capacity. Is it to be welcomed?
I work in a GP practice, and for what I know,
I see the frustration in my patients, and more of them are now resorting into their personal funds to essentially strengthen the private sector through their own means, doubly on top of paying taxes. So as far as I'm concerned, I just want to have my patients see the secondary care services sooner, not have to wait months and months and months just to be seen by a secondary care physician. I don't really care where it is at this point. And I think that's a lot of people at this point. They're just frustrated. They don't care who they see. They just want to be seen by somebody.
So you're not ideological about this at all, just pragmatic. If it's quicker and there's capacity, then fine. Doesn't matter if it's a private facility, doesn't matter if it's a public facility, that doesn't matter. But do any of your colleagues take a different view? Perhaps members of the BMA, would they have any problems with this, do you imagine?
Look, the idealist in me would love to see the NHS get the funding that is now being pumped into the private sector. And of course, this would mean that the people working in the NHS are, paid the same as the people working in the private. And we will see less people moving from the NHS, the brain drain that we're seeing into the private sector from the NHS. We will see less weakening of the NHS. But in the past 10, 14 years, we've seen how the NHS has slowly dwindled. We've seen the state of the NHS. And frankly speaking, me personally, I have lost a bit of faith in the NHS now. At this point, I would rather prefer that the patients are put first. And if that means that the government puts money into the private sector, then so be it. It just means that my patients will be in less pain for less time. They will get to their problems solved sooner. At this point, as a GP, that's what my priorities are.
What do you think the biggest pinch points are within the whole healthcare system as things stand? What gums everything up?
We are in this position not from one day. It's been years and years and years of a certain way the healthcare services have been run. We've been hearing about underfunding for years, but equally each year more and more money is put into the NHS. Why has this not been addressed sooner? We really have to look at big reform, but that's not going to happen overnight. And I can see that West Streeting has the right mindset. He's shown that by essentially prioritizing the junior doctor strikes and trying to put an end to that. And it's clear that he wants to do something about the healthcare system, but it's not going to happen overnight. And I worry that the patients are going to suffer in between, waiting for the positive change to happen. So whilst the positive change is happening, I think in order for the NHS to heal, the burden needs to be taken off so that we can then, reorientate the resources. But at the moment, I think prioritizing the waiting list is a good idea, even if it means funneling that into the private care.
OK, well, very interesting to speak to you on this. Basha Mukherjee, junior doctor, says yes. If it's going to treat people more quickly, if they're going to get diagnosed, if they're going to be seen, if they're going to have their ailments sorted quicker, then absolutely why not?
Yeah, an all-in approach.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think? gbnews.com/your say is the way to get involved.
Yes, lots of you again pointing out that the private sector is already used by the NHS. Absolutely. This is just quite a significant expansion of that, and something that you might not necessarily associate with Labour, with a left-wing government. But it was, of course, Tony Blair who did all this as well, wasn't it?
But we're going to bring you to another story now, because the Met Police has confirmed that 40 new allegations against former Harrods owner Mohammed Al Fayed have been brought after public appeal.
Yes, the accusations include sexual harassment, assault and rape, and come after a BBC documentary last month came out in which multiple women said they were assaulted by the late billionaire.
Well, joining us now to explain more is our Home and Security editor, Mark White. Mark, just more names keep on coming.
Yes, indeed. In the wake of that documentary, the Metropolitan Police put out an appeal for any potential victims of Mohammed Al Fayed to get in touch, and now confirming that 40 new victims, alleged victims, have come forward making allegations, including sexual assault and including rape from the former Harrods owner. The police say that's in addition to 21 separate allegations from 21 women that were made between 2005 and 2023. And the police were investigating that. On 2 occasions, they passed files of evidence to the Crown Prosecution Service. They made 5 separate inquiries of the Crown Prosecution Service, but for whatever reason, the CPS decided not to pursue a prosecution against the former owner of Harrods, who, as we know, died last August at the age of 94.
Well, it's quite extraordinary, isn't it, with all these allegations coming out, very, very serious allegations, that he wasn't prosecuted years and years ago.
Well, that is a big question that I think will need to be answered at some point by the Crown Prosecution Service. You would think that 21 victims in and of themselves is a high enough number to warrant some kind of action by the Crown Prosecution Service. Now, of course, add to that these additional 40, and then add to that the confirmation today from the Harrods Survivors Group, which is a group of lawyers representing people who say that they have been abused by Mohammed Al Fayed. They've confirmed that 116 separate women have come forward and made allegations to them for a variety of offences, including sexual offences and rape. And they don't just relate to the Harrods department store, but also to other businesses that the billionaire owned, including Fulham Football Club, his residences in Park Lane and in Oxted, and also relating to the Ritz Hotel in Paris, which, of course, we know that he owned for a time as well. So a lot of women coming across making allegations over a long period of time. The allegations that we know of stem from 1979 to 2013, so a 34-year period.
And of course, Mark, as you rightly say, Mohammed Al Fayed died last year. I mean, to some extent, this compounds the issue that there's the tragedy of what has allegedly taken place, and then the lack of closure almost for all of the potential victims. I mean, who is there left to prosecute for the Crown Prosecution Service?
Well, I mean, in terms of the victims, first of all, of course, they can gain something at least from coming forward and being recognised for the trauma, the ordeal that they suffered. And they can be pointed, obviously, in the right direction of people that were perhaps in a better position to help them with whatever trauma they may still be suffering after their ordeals. But there are potentially other individuals still alive today that, according to the police, may have had knowledge of what was happening, may have somehow facilitated or turned a blind eye to what has happened as well. So it is absolutely possible, and indeed the Metropolitan Police has confirmed that a number of the allegations that have been made are not just against Mohammed Al Fayed, but others linked to Mohammed Al Fayed. So we'll see where that investigation takes them.
So while he personally won't face justice, there may well be others who do. Mark White, thank you very much indeed, our Home and Security Editor, for bringing us the latest on that one.
Yeah, well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up on today's programme. A Rotherham grooming gang survivor is searching for a missing file, which could be crucial to a prosecution in her case. We'll have all of the details after this.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
The London premiere of the first Bond film, Dr. No, was 61 years ago.
Wow.
Today, which is just quite something. Let's talk to AJ Chowdhury, who's a Bond movie expert. Actually, I mean, obviously there's been the evolution in the films, but there's still that longevity there. They've tweaked, they've changed, but we still have a passion for it.
Absolutely. James Bond is a British cultural heirloom. From the Ian Fleming novels and the literary heritage to the movies still being produced by the family, the Broccoli family, Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson, They're fantastic. They're global brand leaders. But also, at the end of the day, they employ lots of people in the film industry. They've kept the institutions in Britain alive and around the world. It's the best filmmakers around the world. Great actors, great stars, but constant renewal and giving us something different, yet something traditional.
I really like this sort of gritty Daniel Craig stuff.
Whereas I don't.
No, you're not a fan. But the genre has changed from something that was slightly comedic, really, quite light and fun, to something a bit heavier. Is that a bad thing or a good thing?
You know, there's renewal. Like, I'm sure people... I grew up with Timothy Dalton. He's my favourite Bond. George Lazenby, the one of... is in the most critically acclaimed Bond film. And Daniel Craig has made the brand so commercially and critically acclaimed. So we're now all waiting on bated breath for the next James Bond.
Who do you think it could be? Who's your money on?
Nobody knows at the moment.
But Sean Connery came back, didn't he, and made a Bond movie that wasn't officially sanctioned. It's all very bizarre.
Sean Connery came back a couple of times. He left after You Only Live Twice, then came back again, of course, with enough money. He comes back, and there's a complex legal situation. Sean Connery had a kind of love-hate relationship with James Bond. Unfortunately, that's how he's remembered.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun. No, he didn't say that, Dave. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Conservative MPs have finally chosen their top two for the leadership. And now, it's over to the members. Join me, Christopher Hope, on Thursday as Kevin Badenoch and Robert Jenrick are quizzed by Conservative Party members and myself at our GB News leadership event.
And afterwards, join me, Patrick Christie, from the live studio audience and a star panel as we discuss what it means for the Conservative Party and what it means for you. Decision Time, the race to lead, from 7 p.m. this Thursday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 23 minutes past 2, and you have been getting in touch on all of the stories that we've been covering today.
Yes, you have indeed, particularly on the NHS. Lots of you pointing out that you've actually used both NHS care and private care through the NHS, and it's been a success for lots of you. But Barbara says, does nobody realise that waiting lists are not confined to the NHS? If you swamp the private healthcare system, those who have insurance will have to wait, just like NHS patients, as the same consultant surgeons work in both and can only be in one place at one time. This happened during the pandemic, when many people started using their savings to get treatment. It was a disaster. I know firsthand. Yes, this is why I asked earlier to the doctor who would get priority if there was a bit of a race for resources in the private sector as well.
Yes.
People who've paid, or people who've paid through their taxes, I guess, for the NHS.
But there is also this question about capacity. Zaravian, I think I've pronounced that correctly, has said, we keep being told about this free capacity in the private healthcare system. Well, instead of all these doctors working 3 days NHS, 2 days private, why not get them working 4 days NHS?
Strap them down.
But I think this misunderstands the point of this proposal. It's not about using up capacity that already exists. It's about funding the creation of new capacity being built, new diagnostic centres being built by the private sector. So I think perhaps sometimes when we talk about this, we sort of say, we can use private sector capacity as if it's sitting there unused as things stand, when actually proposals like this seem to be much more sensible to me to create new capacity.
But would it create more private demand at the same time? I don't know. if you build a bigger diagnostic centre, would more people go private there? I don't know. But Sharon says, why should the NHS doctors earn as much as the private doctors? Having used both, I have more faith, a better, kinder service when I go private and much cleaner and efficient. I think it really depends where you go. I mean, for example, you can see exactly the same surgeon as you would if you paid thousands of pounds to go privately as you would in the NHS in the case of emergencies, but perhaps that, you know, the long waiting lists, there is a bit of a lack of morale in some hospitals, I think it's fair to say. So that can make it feel a little bit worse.
No. Let's get a broader perspective now from Joe, who says, like everything in the UK at the moment, it's becoming more apparent that the issues aren't on the front line, it's the departments that are responsible. Be that the Department of Health or the Home Office, until the rot is removed in the civil service, so says Joe, it will just keep going round and round in circles.
And Peter says, I've had 3 operations in a private hospital, all paid for by the NHS. I was given a list of hospitals from which to choose. Well, you've had a pretty good experience. That would be quite nice, just getting a list of hospitals, not being necessarily just assigned one.
They're doing that more and more on the NHS app. That was something Sunak brought in, about using capacity, moving people around. If you're willing to travel 100 miles, why not?
Yeah, why not? Anyway, in other news, a Rotherham grooming gang survivor has told of her hunt for a missing file that could be crucial to a trafficking prosecution.
Well, the unnamed woman was groomed and exploited by gangs of men while she was a teenager living in supported accommodation. She says she was driven across the country and used as a commodity in a drug deal between 2 gangs.
Well, the case against 2 men charged with her trafficking was thrown out due to lack of evidence, so the search for this file could be crucial.
Well, for more on this exclusive story, we're joined by GB News national reporter Charlie Peters. Charlie, what more can you tell us?
Well, this hunt for justice has been going on now, Tom and Emily, for 2 decades. Elizabeth, not her real name, has shared much of her testimony with GB News over the years that we've known her and worked with her on several stories. But this is one of the worst in her experiences because she came close to justice when in 2018, 2 men did appear in court charged with her trafficking. But it was thrown out due to a lack of evidence. And I think we have a clip to show of an interview I had with Elizabeth recently where she detailed what happened to her.
Trafficked from Rotherham down to Bristol by 2 Pakistani males. The thing is with CSA, it's like a game of lottery. People get your number and they just pass numbers around. They just appeared one day. It was already out of control, but that's when it becomes slightly, it was up in the game a little bit, yeah. They were trying to give us ecstasy and drinking. I know quickly that there was something not right with the behaviours and things like that. When we got into Bristol, I can always remember, I've got distorted memories of it, but I can always remember like entering Bristol, but there was like a wall with water coming down. I'll always remember that. And then when we got to the car auction place, told us to get out and just left us.
Well, what happened after she was abandoned in Bristol? Her support worker, where she was staying in a supported accommodation location in Rotherham, got her on a train from Bristol back to Rotherham. At the time, Avon and Somerset police refused to pick her up and support her. They said, "We aren't a taxi service." When she got back to Rotherham, having been used as part of that drug deal between competing Pakistani gangs in Bristol, she was told that there would be a full evidence file gathered. Now, I've been told by several whistleblowers, including Elizabeth, that that file was extensive. It detailed what she experienced in that trafficking ordeal. They had number plates, they had names, nicknames of the offenders, and details of what occurred. But at the time, Tom and Emily, you'll know that South Yorkshire Police and the local authorities totally failed to support victims of the grooming gang scandal. Some 1,500 victims were neglected by those state authorities. So even though this information information was passed to the police, nothing was done. Years later, when this scandal broke, the National Crime Agency did work with Elizabeth and did charge 2 men in cooperation with the Crown Prosecution Service. But unbeknownst to the NCA, Elizabeth had done her own digging. She is as much a survivor as she is an investigator. She took this on her own. She went to Rush House, where she was staying at the time, and asked them for that file. She knew it had been made. When she arrived to pick it up in 2015, a council worker met her in the car park and, I'm told, said that she was there to help her through the process. But when they went inside to sit down and talk about it, no file was there. Some files were present, some basic administrative information, but the extensive file about her experience had gone missing. They couldn't say where it was. Another whistleblower in this very delicate and detailed story has told me that they raised the concern with Rotherham Council. They said that they put in an external investigator to assess this situation. For the last 2 weeks, I've asked Rotherham Borough Council to prove to me what happened with that investigation. They can't find any trace of it. There's a missing file out there relating to a horrifying ordeal that Elizabeth endured. 2 men, she says, have walked free because of that missing file. 2 men have escaped justice, and she wants it.
Well, that is stark. Thank you very much indeed for following this story for us. I mean, could it be that this file was deliberately destroyed?
Well, I mean, that's the question that I'm asking today, and indeed it's what Elizabeth, the survivor, has been asking for many years. What's in that file? Who's being protected? It's worth noting that across the many years of coverage we've done on this channel on the grooming gang scandal, so few public servants have been put through any courts or have had themselves forced to resign in disgrace. There have been about 48 people convicted of crimes related to the Rotherham scandal. 1,500 children were abused. Hundreds more have walked free. But Elizabeth and many of the whistleblowers I've spoken to on this story say it's not just about those abusers, it's about those in the public sector, the police and the local authorities who looked the other way. When I spoke to Rush House about this, that supported accommodation space, they said that in 2018 they handed over all of their files as their funding scenario changed. Rotherham also told me that when a former person leaves the company, all their emails are deleted. So questions still need to be answered.
Well, we know that you'll be tenaciously following that story, asking those questions for us. Charlie Peters, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, lots more coming up. Number 10 has declined to say whether the government's first 100 days has been a success. Why could that be? And also, where is the former Chief of Staff, Sue Gray? She's got a good new job, but she's not at the latest gig that seems relevant. Anyway, let's get your news headlines.
It's 2:33. These are your headlines on GB News. BBC presenter Jay Blades has pleaded not guilty to engaging in controlling or coercive behaviour towards his wife, Lisa Marie Bzozin. Blades, who fronts primetime show The Repair Shop, was charged with 1 count of engaging in controlling or coercive behaviour in an intimate or family relationship by police last month. And we will bring you more on that story as we get it. Now in Florida, the clear-up has begun in the aftermath of the deadly Hurricane Milton, with at least 16 people known to have died. Hundreds have been rescued from apartments, while the Coast Guard saved a man clinging to a cool box off the Gulf of Mexico. More than 4 million homes and businesses in Florida were left without power yesterday when the hurricane struck. It's estimated to have caused tens of billions of dollars in damage, but officials say the worst-case scenario has been avoided. To the Middle East now, at least 22 people have been killed and 117 others injured in an Israeli strike on a central neighbourhood in Beirut, according to the Lebanese Health Ministry. It's being reported a senior Hezbollah figure targeted in the attack is understood to have survived. Meanwhile, Israel said Hezbollah fired more than 190 projectiles from Lebanon into Israel yesterday. Back in the UK, Sir Keir Starmer is not planning to hold a celebration to mark his first 100 days tomorrow. That's according to Number 10, who also declined to say if the first 100 days have been a success, saying instead it is for the public to judge that. It comes as the Prime Minister chaired the first Council of Nations and Regions in Edinburgh today, but without Sue Gray. She was appointed as the Council's new special envoy, but Number 10 have said she's taking a break after the intense commentary about her work in government. And finally, Elon Musk has unveiled a Tesla Cybercab without a steering wheel and an Optimus humanoid robot, announcing that the future is here. Tesla launched the much-anticipated robotaxi at an event in Los Angeles overnight, with CEO Elon Musk saying drivers would be able to make passive income from the new developments. He confirmed that the Cybercab would go into production in 2026 and cost less than $30,000. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Sam Francis will have more in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Well, plenty of showers across Scotland, but for many of us, there's going to be plenty of fine and sunny weather. It is going to be feeling cold through much of the day, though, and that's because we're still dragging in some air from the Arctic, which is moving its way across the country. We do have some weather systems just moving their way into Scotland, bringing that unsettled field here. So much more cloud across Scotland, perhaps at times western parts of Northern Ireland, some showers, longer spells of rain. This could turn heavy at times, perhaps even wintry across the Scottish peaks. But elsewhere across much of England and Wales, plenty of autumnal sunshine. And in lighter winds, it shouldn't feel quite as cold as yesterday, but it will still have that chilly feel in the air. And as we progress into the evening, those unsettled conditions are going to continue across Scotland's showers, longer spells of rain in northern parts, and it still could have a wintry element across higher ground. Still a few showers feeding into western parts of Northern Ireland, but elsewhere there's going to be plenty of clear skies to end the new week. Perhaps just a few showers drifting in towards southern coasts. Now, there will still be plenty of clear spells overnight, perhaps not quite as many as last night, so not getting quite as cold, but it is still going to be another chilly night. Still a chance we could see some pockets of frost around Wales, across the Midlands, and just anywhere where you really catch those longer clear spells. But moving into parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, that's where we're going to continue to see those blustery showers and those spells of rain. So an unsettled start here, and this rain is gradually going to slowly move its way through into the Scottish border, northern parts of England, so quite a wet day on offer here. Gradually clearing from the north, but still a chance of those wintry showers across higher ground, and still plenty of that autumnal sunshine to start the weekend. Still the chance of a few showers here and there, and it is going to be feeling cold, particularly in that brisk breeze.
The latest GB News travel.
I'm John Vincent. Slow traffic on the M90 southbound in Edinburgh at junction 1A Kirklickston. Queues on the M40 northbound in Warwickshire. It's partially blocked due to a traffic problem around junction 15, the Warwick bypass. Severe delays in Essex. The M11 southbound has been closed for an accident between junction 8 Bishop Stortford heading towards junction 7A Harlow North. Diversions are signposted, but those routes are also looking pretty congested. Delays on the M3 northbound in Hampshire. 2 lanes closed for an accident between junction 10 Winchester heading towards junction 9, the Winnell roundabout. Delays on the M5 northbound in Devon. It's all due to an earlier broken down coach at junction 27 for Tiverton. And we're seeing slow traffic on the M25 anti-clockwise in Essex if you're travelling between junction 26 Waltham Abbey towards junction 25 Enfield. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It is now 39 minutes past 2, and Martin Daubney is up next with his show through till 6. Martin, what have you got in store for us today, then?
Hi guys, on today's show, got a sensational exclusive. A police whistleblower speaking for the first time after yesterday's revelations that Rick Pryor said police officers were too afraid to arrest ethnic minorities in case of racism claims. I'm getting a former cop called Ant, 7 years on the beat, says that's exactly what happens routinely across the country. Furthermore, Black officers playing the race card to get promoted, stabbing their white colleagues in the back with no support from top brass. All white police officers now the bottom of the pile. I'll have a sensational expose on that. First time this guy has ever spoken. A brave individual to come forward as he is today. Plus, can Robert Jenrick reunite the right, or is he just a plastic Nigel Farage? He's making all the right noises, but is he all mouth and no trousers? And secondly, then first it was two-tier Keir, then it was free gear Keir, and now 100 days in, Keir Starmer has cancelled his 100-day party. It's now officially no beer Keir. That's all coming up 3 till 6.
Looking forward to it. Amazing. I mean, the rhymes are endless. I mean, the next 4.5 years are going to be a joy. Martin Torbeney, look forward to it from 3. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, speaking of Keir Starmer, Number 10 have declined to say if the Labour government's first 100 days in office have been a success. Could it have to do with a YouGov poll that's come out today that suggests half of Labour voters are disappointed with the first 100 days?
Well, it all comes as the Prime Minister chaired the first Council of Nations and Regions in Edinburgh today. But there was a notable absence. Yes, Sue Gray, the new special envoy for Nations and Regions, was nowhere to be seen. OK, well, we're joined in the studio by our political editor, Christopher Hope.
What exactly is this Council of Nations and Regions that's taken place in Edinburgh? Is this a new thing?
It is new. The idea came from Gordon Brown, the former Labour Prime Minister. He did a report back in 2022 about our system of government, had some ideas about the House of Lords, maybe making it to a Senate. And his idea was to connect further these nations and regions and have meetings more regularly. So we've heard today from Number 10, they call them bilateral meetings. I'm sure that doesn't mean they're foreign countries, by the way, Scotland and the rest. But yes.
It sounds like that, doesn't it?
Well, yes, but I did ask that question, but they said no, they mean one-to-one. They got into the habit of like a summit, a bilateral. But you have got meetings between Sir Keir Starmer with the First Minister of Scotland, Wales, and the Deputy and First Minister of Northern Ireland. 12, I think it is, city mayors on the sidelines chatting away. So it's a big deal, and I think it's right because I think there was a degree of hostility between the centre, Westminster, and the devolved nations because they're run by different parties under Boris Johnson, maybe under Liz Truss too, and less so under Rishi Sunak. So it's a good idea. But who isn't there is the envoy for the nations and regions. And what's her name again? That Sue Gray person. She was the former chief of staff to Sir Keir Starmer, moved out of her job or on her own volition, take your pick, on Sunday, and now is on a mini career break, we're told by 10 Downing Street this morning.
There's a lot of criminology that goes on behind it. So is this a pretend job? Is this a real job? Will she have staff? Will it sit in the Cabinet Office? Will she be one side or other of that famous door that separates Number 10 from... a lot of people will suggest, perhaps unfairly, that this is not a real job at all. This was a sop given to her, so it didn't look so much like a sacking.
It certainly wasn't a job until it was offered to her. So there's no one in that job until it was offered to her. She's someone who was a former pub landlady in Northern Ireland. She's closely allied to that region of the UK. So that may give us the opportunity to do the job well. But it's a role which had never been described. We haven't yet seen anything in writing. It's a direct ministerial appointment. We're not sure if it's paid, how much it's paid. There's lots of questions. And we're told by 10 Downing Street this morning that she's having a break because of the intense commentary about her work. But
this doesn't really work chronologically, though. Why announce this new role for her and then for her to take a career break? Is there a start date for this new gig?
Well, presumably not if we keep talking about her, because it's the commentary that means she can't do the job. So the more that we discuss Sue Gray right here on GB News, the less work she'll do.
I mean, Sue Gray, she's run a cropper over this, and issues there with Partygate and that inquiring. Obviously, Boris Johnson hates it. She was a very good civil servant before that, and I knew whistleblowers within the Whitehall who said she was a terrific support for them. So in recent years, she's become this kind of lightning rod nod for disaffection with the Labour government. But
maybe she regrets getting into a more political role.
She was really helpful to people who I know who are whistleblowers. So, you know, there's two sides to that story.
And is it perhaps unfair, therefore, to blame all of the issues of the last 100 days on this one person, on Sue Gray, as if she was the Prime Minister? She wasn't the Prime Minister.
No one's doing that.
I think that's a really fair thing to say, Tom. I think that there's a sense that, you know, it's all been dumped on her, but there's someone in charge called Sir Keir Starmer. He's the PM, and things must last with him. And in fact, we come to his 100 days tomorrow, in lobby the lobby meeting with the PM spokesman earlier, we asked how we'll be marking this 100 days, and the answer is he isn't. There's no celebration, no event, nothing. He's coming back to Downing Street tomorrow and carrying on working, preparing for Monday's investment summit.
That's a brutal question, Christopher.
Well, the question was, how are you marking your successful first 100 days in office? I mean, it went really well for the first third, I would argue, for them. You know, their agenda, whatever you think about the politics, they were delivering on their agenda. It kind of ran into the sand in August and haven't really recovered what's going on since then. I said to you earlier, the problem is this budget being delayed. It had to become sooner to give momentum to 100 days.
And everyone's pointing to Sue Gray. Well, perhaps it's actually Rachel Reeves who determined the timing of that. That means departments can't settle their own budgets, can't say we're definitely going to be funding this, definitely going to be doing that.
She announced that in the Rolls-Royce event during the election campaign. I was there, and she said it's because the OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility, need 10 weeks to check the information. So rather than being confident you're not going to spark a run on the pound and going ahead with it, they're hiding behind the OBR, but politically they're now is treading water, and that's the problem.
Rishi Sunak made it a bit tricky, didn't he, by calling the election quite randomly in July. But there you go. Thank you very much, Christopher Hope, our political editor, for bringing us the scoops from Downing Street.
Well, lots more coming up on today's programme. Would you take a taxi that had no driver? Elon Musk has announced new robo-taxis aimed at making minicabs cheaper than buses.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Earlier this week, Olympic swimmer Adam Peaty finally proposed to his girlfriend, because I've been waiting for this, the daughter of Gordon Ramsay, with a gorgeous yellow diamond ring.
Yeah, so the demand for coloured diamonds in the last 10 years has soared by, guess how much, 77% between 2010 and 2019. Joining us now to tell us more about some of the hottest trends in the diamond world is dealer to the stars, Neil Dutson. Good morning, Neil.
Morning, Ben.
And I've got one of your exemplary examples. Look at this bad boy.
So that's a very rare Muso Colombian emerald. And it's alpine green translucent, so it's a really stunning
See if
colour.
we get a close-up.
So pretty impressive.
Can I be very crude and ask how much this is worth?
So value is £200,000.
How much, sorry?
£200,000. Now, the reason is its rarity. It's minor oiling. It's very, very, very pretty. The two diamonds on the side are D-colour, flawless diamonds, just to accentuate the setting.
Neil, how did you get into diamonds?
I studied diamonds in Antwerp. So Antwerp used to be the diamond capital of the world, really. Yeah. 85% of the world's diamonds go through Antwerp, or used to. And now Dubai has taken over. And yeah, I just went to a school there. I learnt about diamonds, and I just didn't want to be seen off in the future.
Neil, I'm very concerned I'm going to drop 200 grand's worth of diamonds into my cup of tea, so can I give that back to you?
Absolutely.
But I can hold one if you like.
Oh, well, I've got
Neil.
a lovely one here.
Thank you.
So this is a fancy vivid yellow. It's 8 carats.
This is my dream ring, just so you know, for this hand. This would be
is it big
amazing.
enough?
So what would I call this? A yellow?
So that's a natural fancy vivid yellow diamond. Value £300,000. So,
it fits
depends
like
where you're buying it from.
If it's like a glove, Neil, maybe it's a sign. It's meant to be mine.
Definitely a sign, yeah.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Oh, last night, Elon Musk, I wasn't expecting it to come straight to me there. Anyway, last night Elon Musk unveiled Tesla's highly anticipated robo-taxi called the Cybercab. Very creative name.
Yeah, it's a nice alliteration as well, Cybercab. But the futuristic vehicle has no pedals.
There's no alliteration there.
Oh, it's Cybercab.
OK.
Yeah, but the futuristic vehicle has no pedals or steering wheel. Of course, Elon Musk announced it by getting into it and watching this car drive away.
Yes, Tesla's new black and white Optimus robots designed to assist, well, these here, the humanoid friend, they're designed to assist with everyday tasks, pretty much like having your own personal butler. So I guess the question is whether you'd want one of these walking around your home.
Quite an expensive way to water your plants, but it can play games with your children as well. Elon Musk said that soon people will be able to buy these humanoid robots for $20,000 to $30,000.
Yeah, quite cheap, eh? Joining us now to discuss this all is motoring expert Adrian Mills. Adrian, what do you make of this flash announcement, these cyber cabs?
Well, I love the fact that I'm called a motoring expert. I even question that because you're talking to a man. I have to say, I actually quite look forward to it by the fact you're talking to a man who took 4 attempts to pass his driving test, including my third attempt. Oh, good for you. Well, including the 3rd attempt where the instructor said, are we going to get in the car? And I said, no. And he said, why not? And I said, well, I've locked myself out. So I think I was failed for incompetence. Elon Musk, right, is the greatest showman. The very fact that this was launched at the Warner Brothers studios in Burbank, California, it's got lots of razzmatazz. But if you go back over the past 3 or 4 years, you'll discover that he was talking about this in 2020. So we're 4 years on. He now says there's going to be something like 1 million of these vehicles across the roads in 2027 at an estimated cost of $30,000 per vehicle. Take it all with a pinch of salt. No wheels, no gears, no pedals. I was actually in one of these vehicles. Somebody down in Eastbourne has spent something like £100,000 on one of them. And as we drove at 30 miles an hour, I suddenly realised that he was chatting very animatedly with his hands and he wasn't driving. And I thought, I have never felt so scared in my life. And I just kept thinking, I know I'm looking at this enormous monitor in front of me as if we're going to go for the moon landing, but I did not feel safe. And that's what it's about. I suspect in 10, 15 years' time, it might be very different. But right now, I'm not sure. And what you've got to bear in mind as well, that in America, there are thousands of people that have reported accidents, and there are 29 fatal crashes as a result of driver assistance
of course
systems.
There'll be crashes. There are cars. But isn't the interesting point that per mile driven in these cars, the chance of getting into an accident is less than humans driving? They never get tired, they don't drink and drive, they can see 360 degrees around all the time, they can spot things coming. You're much less likely to crash.
I think you're absolutely right in terms of the drink and drive and people texting at the wheel, which is still a complete nightmare in this country. However, unless everybody is in a driverless car, then no, because the cars in front of you, when you read stories about people, say, in America, where they are prevalent, they say that actually they speed up, they stop, they go through red lights. They're actually still adjusting to what's happening. They're not being operated by satellite because that's far too expensive. They're being operated by cameras. And it's a bit like, as my friend said, we were having this discussion just earlier, it's a bit like if you go skiing. You may be the worst skier in the world, but at least you know what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
Skateboarders go, not skateboarders, snowboarders go flying past you. And I'm thinking, yeah, because I don't know what they're doing. They don't know what I'm doing. So it's a complete nightmare out there. Would you go in one of these cars?
I absolutely wouldn't, but Tom's obsessed with robots, so he would.
I totally would.
He'd risk his life to try one of these things.
I've seen the statistics. I know I'm safer than being driven by a friend.
Life isn't all about statistics. Adrian, thank you very much indeed. Adrian Mills, we will continue calling you a motoring expert, even though you flopped at your test 3 times. Like myself, 4th time lucky makes you a better driver, in my humble opinion. Anyway, Martin Dalbany up next. We're back on Monday.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Well, there will be some unsettled weather around to start the weekend, but still plenty of dry and bright weather. And even though there will be sunshine, it is going to feel cold. Currently, we've got high pressure dominating to the south, bringing lots of fine and settled weather, but we've got low pressure in the north, and that's bringing an influx of cloud and plenty of showers across Scotland, with some